Just a reminder that any thoughts, opinions, and points of views expressed during this podcast are those of the individual and not of the Grand Lodge, appendant body, or concordant body that individual may belong.
Welcome to Pen and Compass. I'm Jeff Bennett. I'm the host tonight. We have our co-host Rodney, who's in the background right now, but he'll be joining us in due time. And tonight we have an amazing guest. We always have amazing guests, right? But it's Dirk Hughes from the state of Michigan, and he is the director of the Michigan Masonic Museum and Library.
Very good.
Library Museum, I think, actually is that. He's locally known as the Grand Historian of the state of the Grand Lodge of Michigan. This is kind of his unofficial title, and so we want to welcome him. He's a historian with the story to tell us tonight, and he's going to be talking a lot about. You'll be shocked. Look at behind me, beehives and bees and beekeeping and all kinds of cool stuff. So, man, what's going on, Dirk? How are you, buddy? So glad
Thanks,
that you're
brother.
here.
Brother Jeff, I'm doing great. It's good to see you. I've missed you.
I miss you all the time. Yes, you're one. You're on that list of people that we met about 5 years ago. We'll talk about that in segment two, I think, tonight, but part two. But anyway, let's get down to it. I am so glad you're here. And kind of on Pin and Compass, we try to focus on, we're all Freemasons that usually are talking here so far. We'll probably expand that and do some things with other folks. But want to start out, whenever I joined Freemasonry, it actually started before that with my college fraternity and that kind of ritual fraternity initiation experience. Where's your background in that? And where are you kind of, what's your history on that?
Well, I didn't have any official fraternal relationships prior to joining Freemasonry, but I come from a Masonic family. And my family had like little initiations within their own family structure, which was kind of interesting, whether it be deer hunting or whether it be playing poker, or the first time that you ever did it, they would have some kind of little initiation process that you had to go through. A lot of my grandfather was a Freemason, my uncles were Freemasons, and I'm not sure if they pulled that from their Masonic experience or not. But my first true initiatory event was my entered apprentice degree. I mean, that was the first time that I ever really experienced a truly structured initiatic experience. And that's probably why that memory is stuck with me as one of my favorite memories all this time.
And so that was in Grand Rapids 34 when
Actually,
you
it was
went to,
Valley City 86, but that has since merged into another lodge, and now it's called Grand Rapids 34. And we've been a merged lodge for probably a little over 20 years.
in the same building though.
Yep, same building.
So same building in the Masonic Grand Rapids Masonic Temple Cathedral. Yeah, cool, cool. So what do you get out of this when we do the ritual, the live actually initiation part of it, the experience? Maybe talk about candidate when you're kind of after you became a master mason and or on the other side of those happenings and events, degree team, all those type of things. So
Well, I'm kind of a ritualistic snob. I mean, I understand not everybody's going to be a good ritualist, but I also think that if you can get better at the ritual, you can't help but improve yourself as a human being. I mean, because it's just that reiteration, that memorization, that repetition, and I really do find ritual across the board. I'm one of those cheerleaders. I'm my lodge education officer. So I do little presentations, and the newer guys, they get a little intimidated with ritual, and I kind of give them suggestions on little pieces of ritual they can grab onto. But I don't think ritual can be separated from Freemasonry. It's our learning system. It is integral into how we communicate whatever message or symbolism we're trying to communicate. And they really just are variations on the golden rule. There's really nothing within Freemasonry that goes outside real basic how not to be a jerk philosophies. That's kind of what I use. But I tell you what, some of the rituals, there's a sense of, I guess the closest I could think of is awe. There's some ritual that I go through that I don't know the ritual. I'm feeling the ritual. I mean, I know the words, but it's not because I know the ritual, it's because I'm feeling it. I like become this conduit for this ritualistic conveyance of information, and it becomes bigger than yourself, and I don't think that's specific to me. I think I've seen other brothers do it, and I think that's one of the cool things about ritual is that I tell brothers that the ritual, okay, fine, the candidate is the primary target, the primary audience for your ritual. So you really want to make that experience something special and something significant in their lives. But I also think there's a strong bonding aspect to ritual with the other brothers that are observing. I can't think of a single brother that can watch another brother do ritual and not feel everything that he's going through when he's doing that ritual. He's rooting for him, he's behind him the whole time. When a brother makes a mistake and gets a little nervous, I think the whole lodge is feeling that, except for maybe the prompter. The prompter might step in and kind of straighten him out, but in general, I
Or the
think that
27 prompters that we seem to have down in
they're
Texas.
called past masters.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
you've got to let me say the words first, dude.
yeah, if I look at
Before,
you, you
yeah,
prompt me.
I know you're trying to remember what you're supposed to say, and you're saying to yourself, I get it, you're practicing, but shh,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
And I tell you what, I mean, there's things like the apron talk. I'm not even sure if I can do the apron talk with people I've mentored all that well anymore because I get choked up. I get emotionally filled, and it's hard for me to complete the ritual, complete that lecture. So that happens occasionally, and there's been wonderful things even within, and I'm gonna share this little anecdote with you. I was a thrice potent master for the Lodge of Perfection in my valet. And are you guys Scottish Rite members?
I Southern jurisdiction. I think Rodney.
So in one of your degrees, do you go into a big delta and you're doing the anointing? Are you familiar with that? Okay. We're
Maybe
Northern
in other,
Masonic.
maybe in other parts, more York, right?
Well, anyway, and hopefully I'm not revealing anything. There's nothing in Michigan. Modes of recognition are the only things that we have to protect, and everything else we can kind of talk about. And I usually hold back on people that are
We
thinking
put a
about,
disclaimer. Remember in the production sheet that we just went over, we have a disclaimer that
okay.
talks about that. So
Well,
you're
there's
good.
a part where a number of brothers gather into a delta, and the thrice potent master goes through this very long, beautiful ritualistic speech. And at the time, he's also doing an anointing with oil. And my father, who just passed away a couple of years ago, he was getting really old, and I was about to go out of that position. I really wanted him to see me do it because it's a very long, involved part. And we had him in the triangle, we had him in the delta, so he was one of the people exemplifying a candidate. And as I'm going around, I had done this, 4 or 5 times, and I had it down. I had it just real smooth. And the second I touched that trowel to my dad's head, the emotions just like wow, overwhelmed me, and I couldn't say a word. I stopped like the brakes had been put on, and I finally had to like just kind of shake it off because I was looking right at my dad in his eyes and continued the rest of the speech. And then after the degree, people were like, wow, Dirk, how in the heck did you forget the ritual? You'd done it like 5 times. And I'm like, I didn't forget it. I just couldn't say it. That was my dad that was right in front of me when the brakes went on. And so I think those moments I live for. I live for those moments that I'm feeling ritual, that it's coming through me. And I might be going off the rails on your initial question, but I think there's so much beautiful about ritual that, and I claim, Freemasonry is kind of like self-improvement. That's a self-improvement school, leadership college, whatever you want to talk about it. But self-improvement is like an abstract thing. It's really hard to measure because if you're like me, I'm good one day, I get a little worse the next day, I'm better the next day after that. So I kind of go like this. But if I'm trending up, that's a good sign. I want to trend up.
I
But I
always
think,
joke that I'm a regional sales manager, and people sometimes go, "Who do you managing?" I'm like, Monday Jeff, Tuesday Jeff, Wednesday Jeff,
yeah,
Thursday and Friday Jeff, and probably Thursday and Friday Jeff should be promoted because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday Jeff need to be fired.
yep, you should get demerits.
Because I don't get anything done, and then it's like, oh, I gotta get something done this week to
Yeah, and that's kind of, and so it's
earn my
hard to measure
paycheck.
self-improvement, hard to measure that. But I think the better you get at ritual, and you may never be a great ritualist, but you can always improve as a ritualist. And I think getting better at ritual helps kind of measure our improvement as human beings, because I find it very hard to believe that if you're getting better at ritual, if you're knowing it, feeling it, that you're not applying it to your life in some way. So I just feel it's a fairly decent measure of improvement is just getting better at ritual.
Yeah, I think I've said this in our other episodes whenever people brought up similar things about integrating the lessons that we learn, the themes, the symbols that are trying to teach us these things, that I even love to quote that to the right set of people are also initiated in that degree to me. And I love to throw, specific right out of the script things just, that are appropriate to say and just to remind people. Sometimes it's a kind of in a mentoring facet, or sometimes it's just kind of to add to the conversation that myself and that person are having.
Yeah,
So
I do it all the
yeah,
time too.
yeah, and it's one of those things. I think I sit sometimes passively on the sidelines, and I feel conviction because we have so many things that are how to behave in life, proper things to focus on, just like maybe in a religious group that would be trying to remind you of those morals and those things that are make you a good citizen or make you a good what you were talking about earlier, the golden rule things. And so I think that's a lot of times it depends on where I'm at and what's going on. And then there's other times, like you said, there's certain degrees and certain subject matters, especially anything dealing with kind of the tabernacle or the temple worship systems that are kind of built in as symbols. Um, I really have this like leaping up in my spirit whenever I
Yeah.
get to be on, whether I'm actively in it or, but especially if I'm sitting on the sidelines. And a lot of times I've kind of become more of a stage manager, making sure, especially if we're in the York right side of things, staging the degrees the way I think they should be interpreted with the equipment that we have on hand, lighting and things like that, and trying to reenact maybe that scene out of the Bible as close as we can with what we have to work with, which I think that's one of the things that sets fraternity ritual apart for men, especially. You get into this transmutation. That's for you, Rodney, by the way. Transmutation into another world of going into this other state. So,
Well, I'll tell you what's beautiful too is like when you get a new brother, like a brand new master mason, that grabs onto a piece of ritual, whether it be the trowel work, the master mason working tool with a nice short paragraph, or like one of the fellow craft lectures. And just to see the nerves the first time they do it, and then when they succeed at doing it, and the look in their eyes that they got through it, and I get joy from that. I get joy from seeing another brother do ritual.
yeah. And if that person maybe does that translate over into them in other leadership positions, in other volunteer organizations, or
Mhm.
in their job, or just being more confident as a grown man. So, well,
Yeah,
cool.
I think it does translate. And I think a lot of people don't realize the practical applications of Masonic lectures, Masonic rituals in everyday life. I tell you what, there's nothing magical about Masonic ritual that keeps me from wanting to flip people off in traffic that cut me off. But the ritual goes through my head. And I'm like, that's not how a Mason behaves. That's a practical application to me behaving on the highway. So it works.
So you mentioned that you get an opportunity within your Blue Lodge, and maybe even your Scott. I think probably in your Scottish Rite Valley, and probably tons of other places because you're a very talented, creative person, and you get to do a lot of educational things. Or you've written papers, essays, magazine articles. I can't remember if you've written any books or not.
Mm,
So
not yet.
what's kind of the literary accomplishments of Dirk Hughes?
Well, most of them have been writing content for Cornerstone Magazine out of the Grand Lodge of Michigan. So they do, I think it's a bi-monthly, maybe quarterly, I forget. But I've been kind of giving them some content articles, whether it be the history of the Grand Lodge or the importance of fellowship. They really kind of give me a theme to
Hmm.
write on every time they want me to write something. So those articles are usually running, 1,500 to 2,000 words. there's always a book in the mix. I've been wanting to and been outlining a book, basically what Freemasonry means to me, and I think that's kind of how Freemasonry is. It really is defined by the specific brothers. We have specific traditions, but Masonry is defined by like every singular Mason. A lot of PowerPoints, a lot of presentations. I've kind of built this arsenal as the director of the museum and library. One of the things I do is go around to different lodges and offer Masonic education for their education nights. And so I try to give them a nice variety of subjects to pick from. They
Such
usually come.
as, such as, such
Well,
as.
I mean, clandestine masonry, understanding anti-masonry, some historical aspects of the Knights Templar, um, history of Eastern Star, history of Royal Arch, add history to just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to try to do, recognizing logical fallacies. I think that's important, understanding rhetoric and logic. You're kind of like picking specific things.
Yeah.
And so, like for example, the presentation on clandestine masonry, I realized when we're promising not to sit in a lodge of clandestine masons, a lot of my brothers don't even know what that is. You know, is that something that we have to worry about? And people would be surprised how many clandestine organizations. Michigan has 50 different clandestine Grand Lodges within its own territory. People just don't realize that. They're not that populated, but the simple fact that there's that many clandestine groups is kind of amazing. So I try to step people through on the history of those. When I talk about the understanding anti-masonry, and just because people are going to get some pushback by different political, religious, conspiratorial perspectives. And so for them to understand where that's coming from and to be gentle with the dialogue that they might invite with those people, and I completely encourage them to do that, enter into a dialogue to maybe, if nothing else, learn more about it. It might be that there's nothing that they can say that's going to change the other person's mind, but there might be something that they can get out of it to find out where they're coming from.
Yeah. So are you on MasonicInstruction.com?
I am not.
You have, you're not, you, no?
No.
Okay. Well, that would be, I'd recommend Rodney and I are both not are on that. That's something that RJ Johnson, who has already done an episode on Pen and Compass, he developed for guys like us and the usually the guests that are going to be on Pen and Compass as a way for you to get recognized and all those presentations you were just talking about to have a list of those out there and kind of your credentials and things like that. So we'll in a break or when we are working on some of the other projects we've got going on in the future, I'll send you some of that info and
Very cool.
it's pretty easy to upload your profile and takes them a while to takes them a minute or so to approve it or whatever, and then headshots and that kind of stuff. Anyway, um, what else was? Let's see. Well, that's cool. Would you be open to? Obviously, you're doing a lot of things in Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, maybe that state down south. I know how I'm supposed to say that. Um, that one
We
that
don't,
starts
we
with an
don't, the one with
O.
the O?
Starts with an O and it ends with an
We
O.
don't, I don't know what
Hey,
you're talking about.
all my Ohio Masonic buddies don't hate. I just understand the
Donate.
difference. Don't hate. And if I was talking to one of y'all, I'd say that state up north. I just know how to navigate those waters near the Great Lakes. Um, would you be open to doing? You know, I've been privileged in the last few years to get a chance to teach to groups in Michigan and Massachusetts and things like that online, and kind of had like a quarterly gig on that. So would you be open to something like that? If there's a Blue Lodge in Texas or Oklahoma, someone that I know that would be looking for some of the things you talked about, would you be able to do
Most
that?
definitely. As a matter of fact, I've already gotten a little bit of traction in that regard. Last couple of years, I've been giving like an annual presentation to the York Grand Lodge of Mexico. So I usually get about 60, 70 guys on a Zoom call and I just kind of go through the presentation. So what's nice about technology is that you can give presentations around the globe without changing out your pajamas. I mean, you might want to put a shirt on.
T-shirts.
Yeah. So
Beverage of
technology
choice.
opens that up. And I'm definitely on board with that kind of stuff.
Cool, cool. Yeah, that I would highly recommend uh, all of us that are on Pen and Compass. Find us, track us down, reach out to us. We would love to just not that we think we know it all, but we would love to share what we do know, what we're experts in, and everybody has their own unique expertise. We'll talk about that coming up. I'm kind of teasing that in this first segment. So you and I've known each other going on almost 6 years now. We
Mm,
met each other what, like September, October 2019.
doesn't seem that long.
Huh? It doesn't,
Doesn't seem
does
that
it?
long ago.
It doesn't. And we've gotten to meet once more, I think, in person. And we just want to talk about that. I love it whenever I have a guest on, and the reason I know you is because this happen chance type serendipitous cosmic alignment divine providence. I think really, I mean, seriously, that whole day, I just think I've had a lot of amazing Masonic days in my life and kind of Masonic road tripping, but that was one of the ones that really, along with that whole week in Michigan, really kind of changed my perspective on a lot of things. It was really great and cool. So let's go back. I sent an email to the Grand Lodge, and somehow I think someone in like y'all have like a member services, or at that time you did in 2019. You had a member services person. They set me up with some guys in Taylor, Michigan at Grand Golden Arc 5, I think it's 595. Uh, as I was in Detroit for a little bit that week, and then I transitioned, and my business sales trip took me to the western side of the state, and I ended up in Grand Rapids, I think middle of the week, and so you got like an email or something, or somebody called you and said, "Hey, this guy from Texas
Yeah.
is gonna come hang out." And
I think through Grand Lodge, they sent it to the secretary, and the secretary of my lodge reached out to me and kind of gave me a heads up that we were probably going to have a visitor at lodge, or there was going to be somebody coming into town, and that I should kind of expect a Texan to be rolling through the door anytime. I was like, oh,
yeah, so I get like this contact information. I think you and I might have talked on the phone or emailed, talked or texted or something or whatever. And so you're like, "Yeah, be up here at this time or whatever." And it was the night you were Grand Rapids 34, Masonic Lodge number 34, that meets in the Grand Rapids. Is it Masonic Temple or Cathedral? I can't remember which.
we got Grand Rapids Masonic Center, although it says
Center.
Masonic Temple on the front of the building.
Well, that's, yeah. So it's a historic building. Was it go back to like 1911, 1915?
1915.
Yeah, yeah. And what is its kind of national, international claim to fame? Who is connected? Who's the famous national figure, historic national figure now that's connected to that particular?
Well, I'll first say, because I think I know who you're going with it.
Yeah.
I'll first say that it was the first, as far as I know, it was the first Masonic temple in the United States to have as a member of its ownership body, like on the MTA board, the Eastern Star. So we had all of the area lodges, all the appendant bodies, and the Eastern Star. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time the Eastern Star was invited to be on the board as well.
And that's significant in 1915 because women didn't have the right to vote then.
Right?
And this is
Yep.
the Eastern Star, for those of you that don't know, is a co-ed. It's but the women actually are kind of in leadership
Yeah.
positions, and uh, it's ladies and women that are associated with Freemasonry by some kind of relationship. Anyway, so that's
And it was
kind of
really, and it
to
was
frame that a
designed
little bit.
to let women have those leadership strategy, ritualistic opportunities that Freemasons could have. They just kind of got their own organization to do that. It was leadership school for the women a long time before they got the vote. I think that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, yeah, I did. That's interesting how that ties into my weekend, but we won't go into that.
Well,
Um,
the person you were probably talking about
yeah,
is, 14 out of our 47 presidents have been Freemasons. Is this who we're talking about?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right on point.
Okay, and so the last Masonic president we have was Brother Gerald R. Ford, and he was initiated at that building. He was a member of Malta Lodge 465, which no longer exists in and of itself. They merged into Doric 342. It's another one of the Grand Lodge of Michigan lodges. So that temple actually has two Grand Lodge of Michigan lodges meeting in it, and a Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Michigan Prince Hall affiliation has been meeting there for 30 years. So we've got three craft lodges that meet there. Gerald R. Ford got his initiation in that building, but I think he got his fellow craft and his master mason as a courtesy degrees down in DC because he was busy being a congressman.
Yeah,
So yeah, we got claim to fame of having one of the 14.
it's
Very
cool.
cool.
Yeah,
I think
that's
so.
cool. That's a cool thing. I mean, those are things that we try to celebrate in a positive way. So, all right, going back to the, so I get off of work. I come over to the building, find my way down through to the basement, which is where the
The
library,
garden level.
the garden level, the the storm shelter is
Yeah, the
part of the
tornado
story
shelter.
later. Um, and so get down there and I'll tell kind of my side of it and trying to figure out where I'm trying to go and everything. And I walk up and it looks like a library, like a public library. It's got books on the shelves and it's got memorabilia and it's got all these archives and these things on display and things. Really nice setup and but you're talking to I think maybe the worshipful master of Grand Rapids or the commander of the command. I can't remember. Another leader, and all of a sudden you just like you're talking to him. You see me come around the corner and stop and go. I bet you're Jeff Bennett from Texas, and I'm like, whoa, like how do people know me already? This is good or I don't know. This is maybe bad.
You had that look in your eye.
Yeah, and I walk like a Texan, huh?
I don't- I'm not even going to go there. But yeah, you look like you were from Texas. You look like a good old boy, brother Freemason. And I said,
Redneck,
that's gotta be Jeff.
redneck.
No,
Well, I am, so you can call me that. That's okay. It's as long as you smile after you say it. So we you show me around. We did a tour of the building, which I love. That's part of Masonic, what I call Masonic road tripping, and you get to do something like that, and it's amazing, 100-year-old building. Um, then eventually we kind of go upstairs. There's a meal, I think before, right, with 30 with
34 has their meals before.
yeah 34. You introduced me around to a bunch of people. One of the people that kind of he and I had like this magnet type thing. I think he knew I might have known I was coming. Also, is Omar Flores,
Yeah.
which is a good friend of both of ours. Omar is an amazing friend, and he has ties to Laredo, Texas, and Laredo Lodge down there. So he's a Michigan guy, but he kind of acts like a Texas Freemason at times too.
Yeah.
So he's an amazing dude, and got to meet him and a bunch of other guys. We had a great meeting. I think what was probably 30, 40 people in attendance.
Yeah, that's about normal for 34.
Yeah, and so the little thing that I didn't understand is that once you get probably north of Louisville, Kentucky, somewhere in there, Nashville, Louisville, somewhere Mason-Dixon line, those old buildings are beautiful, but they don't have any air conditioning.
No.
They don't have any HVAC like we like down south, you know. We hardly even have professional arenas anymore that don't have roofs on them and the AC or the heaters or whatever pumping into it. So yeah, so it was very interesting. Y'all had doors open to the outside, letting the air flow through and ventilate. Pretty large space, but and it needed it even in October. It was kind of a warm, humid evening. That's part of the story. But yeah, saw y'all go through your ritual, open it all up, and everybody treated me really nice. So what's kind of your perspective up until that point, kind of when we got to the meeting? I mean, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I was excited. I was excited I got to bring show and tell. You were my show and tell that night. I was able to like bring a brother from a different jurisdiction. And I kind of enjoy making the introductions to brothers. I want to make sure that you, and you already know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that you are there with a bunch of brothers, but I want to act as a brother and try to make sure you're getting introduced to as many as possible. I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but if I see somebody walk into the dining room and I don't know who they are, I am beelining it for the door to shake their hand to see who they are. So I want to make sure a brother has those kind of opportunities as well. And by that time we had quite some time to spend with each other before the actual meeting. So it was like I was introducing all my brothers to like one of my new best friends, you know?
Well, I
So,
appreciate that.
it had kind of that feeling.
Yeah. And and culturally, probably if you and I sat here and go, a lot of things you and I don't have in a way we have a lot of things in common, and in a way we probably wouldn't. So it's kind of interesting how you do go in and meet a whole new group of people, but in Freemasonry a lot of times it's not, and this is not about Freemasonry, it's more about your accomplishments, but um you do just kind of know those guys after that. And you
Yep.
do kind of, I mean, I love people are always like, I'm always like, can I follow you on, can we become friends on Facebook? Because then I can get to celebrate what you're doing, or maybe grieve with you, whatever. I mean, whatever's going on in your life, that you want to share on Facebook, I get to be a part of that going forward. And it's almost overwhelming to the volume of that I've gotten to. The population is, I like that word that you used earlier, the population of Facebook Masonic friends that I have. Not bragging, just it's just wonderful. Go, oh yeah, I know this guy over in Colorado. For me, I just enjoy that. So we go in the lodge room and the meeting's going on, and all of a sudden I think the lights either go out or there's like a big, huge, like thunderstorm, possible tornadoes, all this like bad weather. We just call it a Tuesday in Arlington, Texas, or Oklahoma City, or whatever. And we just call it, we call it spring and fall. But all this craziness going on, and we all evacuate because we're up
Did we go
on.
down to the museum?
We were all up on, like, what floor is the lodge
The
room on?
the lodge room's on third
Yeah,
floor.
yeah, but there was tornado warnings, or maybe a watch. Anyway, and so I just remember, and this kind of why I brought up Omar's name earlier. So like everybody filters out, and there's like 40 people, and we all gotta and we're going down the elevators and down the stairs and stuff, and somehow Omar gets kind of shoulder to shoulder with me, and we're walking. He just looks at me, and he starts saying some unkind things to me, and starts kind of pointing his finger at me, and he kind of gets up in my face, and I'm like, "What did I do?" He goes, "You brought your weather with how," and probably the nicest way I can probably put it, he probably said something like, "How dare you do that?" But that was one of those things that, obviously that's why he and I care so much about each other, because we right off the bat we hit it off like that, and he knew that he could say that to me, and I would think it's the most funniest thing that happened to me probably in Michigan that week. So so we
No,
get
he's a
down there,
great.
we huddle down, we didn't go diving in any tables or desk, or but we go downstairs because it's a storm shelter, and then we go back up, and everything was great, and then I think we hung out and talked a long time. So and you and I've kept up in touch with each other. And then one of the things that you did say that day, and we'll talk about in another segment, is Chuck Dunning, which is an acquaintance of both of us, the contemplative Mason. We'll talk about that. So when was the next time you and I met?
I think it was a couple years later at the Research Lodge convocation in Lansing. Is that where it was?
July 2023.
Is
Yep.
that when it was?
Yep. You drove over, and I got flown in, and so yeah, we had Art de Hoyos there, Chris
And
Potts from Michigan, you, me,
Matt Parker on that panel?
Matt Parker came in from Nebraska, not Matt
Nebraska.
Park, not Matt, actually Matthew Parker as he goes by,
Matthew.
Matthew Parker, from Nebraska, from the Omaha, Nebraska area, and then
Jonathan Ferguson out of Detroit, I think, was on the panel.
thank you. That's who I needed to make sure I said his. I knew it was Jonathan, but I couldn't remember his last name. I think that was it. Great panel, and then Brandon Mullins was our moderator and kind of MC, and dog and cat and squirrel chaser for the day. But Corey Curtis and Rob Moore. Can I drop any more names here? We're organizing that, and did a wonderful job. We had so much fun, and I remember you and I got to we oh yeah, we got to, in between stuff or at the beginning or whatever, we got to hang out, and that was wonderful. So, what did you think about that experience being on that speaker panel? That's the first time you'd done that, or?
No, no, I've done stuff like that before, and I always enjoy it, and on a number of different levels. First of all, I just love presenting. I like presenting to groups. I just enjoy the whole process of education, but I love rubbing elbows with other brothers that are kind of plugged into the educational process of Freemasonry, because you know that they're doing it from the heart. You know that these guys are in love with the fraternity and they're gonna do this till the day they die, probably. And just to be around those guys is uplifting and it's energizing. And so I always look for those folks, even if it's not even in a symposium like that. I'll look for those guys in lodges because almost every lodge has at least someone that's interested in education. And those are the ones that I have a tendency to get drawn towards because for any number of different reasons. First of all, they probably got questions for me as far as like what can I find in the archives? But probably more importantly, just that we're coming from the fraternity kind of from a similar perspective as an educational system.
Mhm. So for me, I have I've kind of started that in the last couple of years. I kind of got to a certain point where I was confident in my presentations and what I was trying to promote, and it's kind of switched into, especially kind of in my Royal Arch chapter and council and a couple other places. There's kind of some circles of guys that I see have a ton of talent. We have amazing conversations, and I've just got to kind of encourage them and help them enough to where maybe I share in my process, which we're going to talk about in another segment tonight. But um, just kind of encouraging them. Well, I don't know how to do PowerPoint. I'll do it for you. Like, you just write. I'm not really. I wasn't good in English in school. Here's the way you use notes or whatever, and you voice dictate it. You don't have to be the greatest typist in the world, and we can edit it. And like, don't like, it's more about what's inside of you and what's living there that you're not sharing with anyone else. And a lot of what I'm doing, especially between that time of 2019 when you and I met and I came back to Michigan in 2023, was Corey Curtis and I in January of 2023 had a conversation, and I needed that pep talk
Mhm.
first. And he basically, in a very kind of Omar Flores type blunt way, said, you need to get moving in this direction. And so out of that, I mean, that's kind of, there's a lot of other reasons that this podcast exists, but that's kind of one of the motivations for that. And what we're getting to do later this summer in
Yep.
June in San Antonio. All these things kind of come out of that place where he gave me and Rob Moore that whenever they came down and visited in Texas, our Grand Lodge that January, they gave me kind of the confidence, and I felt like they barely knew me, and they're saying like all these encouraging, I'll just say encouraging, ambitious things that I could accomplish if I believed in myself. And wow, what can Freemasonry and one Freemason to another, or any human being, one to the other, what kind of gift can you receive or give greater than that? I don't know many, right?
No, I agree. And think of what it would be like. I mean, there's guys that are really super good at it, and we could name three or four guys that are kind of known, the ones that get interviewed on TV and different stuff like that. But imagine what it would be like to have just mobs of brothers in any jurisdiction that you could just give a call and say, "Hey, will you come down and give a presentation?" I just think that should be part of masonry, that we should be
Yeah.
comfortable to being, especially talking in front of brothers and giving brothers education. They might know it. I mean, I tell you what, I gave a presentation on the historical Knights Templar to a guy that probably knew 10 times more about the historical Knights Templar than I did, but he was gracious enough to kind of let me go through and give my bullet points. And then during the question and answer period, I found out the depth of that subject that he knew. And I was like, well, why didn't he give that presentation? I mean, why wasn't he the one doing it? He knew much more than I did. And it's probably just a little bit of confidence and experience that He probably just hasn't had the opportunity. No one's ever asked him.
Right. Well, I think that's a good place for us to pause real quickly. We're going to go to our break and we're going to come back with segment two. It's going to be a buzzing type segment. We're going to have a lot of buzz going on because we're going to be talking about bees and beekeeping, honey, all kinds of sweet things, beehives, and all the above and all the below. So, with that, this is in segment or part one, and we'll see you after the break. Howdy. So excited about telling you about this great event, June 2025, San Antonio Esoteric Summit. We're going to have a great lineup of speakers. It's a day of interactive subject matter experts coming in from multiple states: Nebraska, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Colorado, all-star lineup. And it's a great event, 50 participants, esoteric subject matters, study, great education, very interactive. I'll be starting off the day talking about interpretation of symbolism. RJ Johnson will be bringing us his views on Esoteric 101 and how that all works. Then we'll go into alchemy with my buddy Rodney McGilvery. TJ Brumfeld will be wowing us with his knowledge and insight on Kabbalah. Dirk Hughes will be also telling us about how bees and beehives, the symbolism masonically as a beekeeper himself. And then we're going to end the evening with Ben Williams unpacking Martinism for us and talking about that. There will also be two other sessions during the day where the different speakers will get together and kind of collaborate, kind of in a jam session, kind of like at a concert at the end. And then we're also going to have a panel for each individual presenter to go over a question and just kind of tell you about themselves and their process. Sounds like a great day. It's going to be a wonderful time. It'll be one of the things that you won't want to miss in 2025. So go and register, sign up, be one of those 50 participants, and we'll see you there in San Antonio. Hey, welcome back. We have got a amazing section, a second part to this conversation, our episode with Dirk Hughes, who is he's the director of the Masonic Museum Library in the state of Michigan for the Grand Lodge of Michigan, and an amazing part of education in Freemasonry and outside of that. And one of the things that he's an expert in that I didn't know when I met him almost 6 years ago, but I found out in the last year or so, is he has a hobby that maybe it's a small side business that is all about beekeeping, honey, beehives, bees themselves, all kinds of fun stuff. And that's why I have this background tonight, celebrating that and celebrating Dirk. So tell us about that. How, when, and where? Start there. Like, people always say, well, I started playing a musical instrument, or I rode my first motorcycle, whatever it is, right? They always have that first high that they got. And what was your introduction into that? Was it family or just something you did later on as an adult? Or
Before I go into that, I just want to give the caveat that I'm not sure if there are any experts in beekeeping. I think they're always in a process of learning, and I have great mentors. I am a capable beekeeper. I'm not sure if I'm an expert. However,
well, you
I
know
think,
more than probably me and most people that are going to watch this episode. So let's just
oh,
start.
no.
That's you're yes, a more knowledgeable person.
So I think I've always been fascinated in any kind of custodianship of wild or of animals. I've always, summers on my uncle's farm, raising ponies and chickens, and I've just been kind of intrigued by that kind of stuff. And then the fact that I was afraid of bees probably had something to do with it as well, because I knew there was a way that I could work with the bees and safely with a level of risk, because you're going to get stung. I mean, there's really no way to get around it. You don't get stung a lot if you're following proper procedures and protocols, but you're still going to get stung no matter how careful you are. And I think one of the things is because I was afraid of bees, I wanted to immerse myself in that and kind of shed myself of that fear. And I fell in love with it. And so I've been doing it ever since.
So go back to like what age were you?
It wasn't that long ago. It was probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than 10 years ago. So there's a lot of different things I did as an adult that I didn't do as a young man. I went to law school as an older guy at the age of 45. I started bees probably about the age of 50. 50 must have been like my watermark year because that's when I started like doing art and painting. I kind of just got this idea that the true memento mori feeling that, remember that I'm going to die. And if I don't do these things now, there might not be a chance to do them. So I kind of started picking up a whole bunch of other things that have always intrigued me and been running with them and trying to teach myself things about them. And so beekeeping has been very satisfying for me. And I was lucky enough to know some people involved with a TED talk that happened in my area. So luckily, it was a couple years after I'd gotten into it. So I had a fairly decent idea about beekeeping, but I was still getting a lot of great advice from mentors, guys that had been doing it since the 1950s. And gave a TED talk on it. And really, to give a TED talk, I'm not sure if you know, but you have to have a certain time. It's memorized. It's like ritual. You don't just get up there and make stuff up. You have to go and audition and then you go and practice. And in getting that presentation ready, I learned and fell in love with all new levels of beekeeping. And so just to throw the sideline, maybe that's what happens with Masonic ritual too, that the more we go into the ritual, we fall deeper in love with it. But anyway, the beekeeping thing really popped up on my radar as far as something that was environmentally responsible and was good for the planet and doable by just about anyone. People get intimidated by things that they don't understand. And I think
So,
things like
well, I
beekeeping.
mean, do you live like kind of out on a decent sized property, or because I mean, I have like a zero lot line. I just bought just converted from a gas powered to a battery power. Like it takes me like 15, 20 minutes to mow my yard. And then there's not much on the backside of the house either, you know. So how would I do have like a little space back there. My wife would freak out if I started beekeeping back there. Um, but how much space do you need maybe? Or do you need it to
You don't
be
need to space it out.
there? Are
You
there
just need to
zoning
go.
restrictions or anything like that?
Well, you have to check with your municipality to see if there's any kind of, because it's livestock. Technically, it's livestock. So you have to kind of check and see what your zoning laws are, but most of them allow for beekeeping. And I tell you what, that was one of the things about the presentation was encouraging people. When I started beekeeping, we were living on like a 5-acre hobby farm with fruit trees and blackberries and grapes. So the bees had a lot of stuff and it had a nice big spot for the bees. So I actually started out with, I don't know, I had like 6 different hives. Um, and then when we moved, I didn't feel the space I had available was on a floodplain, and I didn't want the bees to get flooded out. So I left them on some property over by there. We're really close to some blueberry fields. Holland, where I live, is known for blueberries. So I wanted to make sure the bees were near the blueberries because I like that flavor in my honey.
Hmm.
And it's not like deep blueberry, but you can tell. You can tell what they're pulling from when you eat the honey. And then part of that presentation, just to speak of with you, you can do them in suburbs. I've seen small little plots of land, and the bees will try to go to get their food in the most direct line possible and their water. So if you're next to a pool, like your neighbor has a pool, you want to be careful of that. You want to put up a fence that's going to make those bees go up over that fence and not just fly over to that pool or put water next to them. But also like big cities. We just switched out some equipment in the Grand Rapids Masonic Center, downtown Grand Rapids. And I was talking about the fact that I was thinking about maybe putting some beehives on top of that building, 7 stories up in the middle of Grand Rapids. You can put beehives on like roofs of urban buildings. A lot of people do it. And the bees, they don't want to sting people. They're going to try to just do their jobs. They're going to try to avoid getting in people's way. More importantly, people can just go about their day. And a honeybee, wasps are different. We don't like wasps. So honeybees, they will go out of their way to avoid you. They don't want to tussle with you. They just want to get their nectar and get their pollen, get back to the hive. That's all they want to do. You're just kind of a big lump that they have to fly around. So you can have them anywhere. Seriously, you just legally you might want to check with your local municipal laws and just make sure it's safe. And if you can't put it at your house, you got to have a buddy with a little bit of property outside the city limits that you can pop them on there. And seriously, if you got a garden, your garden will probably produce up to 70% more like volume of vegetation. It's crazy. They've measured it. Like within proximity of a beehive, the produce is so much more significant than outside that proximity. So it's good for the planet for a number of different reasons. You get me talking about bees, I'm gonna shut up. You gotta be careful.
Yeah. So I remember being no, that's what we're here for. Um, so I remember being in Iowa, and we have, we're a big wildflower state in Texas. This time of the year this is kind of like going to New England whenever the leaves change or going somewhere. Texas is all about bluebonnets and Indian paintbrushes and clovers, and they actually restrict on the sides of our highways the the they can't mow until a certain date. I think it's probably like near Memorial Day, so the wildflowers can do their thing.
Right.
And I remember being in Iowa, and I wouldn't say I would say I'm a I would say I'm kind of like Teddy Roosevelt, conservationist, maybe a naturalist to a certain point. I wouldn't maybe use other terminology for me. I think we need to all use the resources as smartly as possible, is the way I'll say it. And I remember Iowa, I think it is, they actually even have a program to where they kind of do the same thing, where there's all the fields that are going to need bees' help. They let things kind of grow wild, and they don't cut it all down nice, and they don't get rid of all that. So it kind of, and it was like a cross pollination zone. They had these like
Yep.
built in like these non mow zones and stuff. And so that, those kind of things, I think you need to stop and kind of swivel your head every now and then, and not just be worried about the guy in front of you not driving fast enough, or or whatever, and I think I saw those because I was with some work colleagues at the time, and I had nothing else to do for a few minutes than look out the side of the window. I was a passenger. But so what is it like to set it, like what you in one of the breaks you talked about, you have some bees that you're picking up, and you're setting up is it like a seasonal thing that you do, or is it year round? I mean, Michigan, it freezes and goes crazy. I have weather that us Southerners, that's why we love being down here.
Yep.
But
In Michigan, the big challenge is to get your bees to survive the year. So the experiments are to winterize. I don't even bother winterizing my bees anymore because they just have a tendency. I lose the hive and I just pick up new bees. So I have a bee vendor here near me who goes down to Georgia, picks up a great big old truck full of bee packages. There's usually about 3,000 bees and a queen per package. It's like a box, a screened in box about the size of a shoebox. And so each one of those boxes has about 3,000 starter bees and a queen. You install them into your hives, and those are usually good to go for the year. Those will grow into anything from like 60 to 80,000 bees and maybe put out a good year, 120 pounds of honey from just that little box that you put in.
one hive.
A good year, I generally get 60 pounds of honey from one hive on a regular basis. A really good year, if the nectar's flowing, you might pull 90 to 120. Each of those boxes usually weigh about 30 pounds. So you can kind of equate that with how many pounds of honey.
So you had 5 or 6 you said at one time, so you got 300. What do you I mean? Are you jarring that up and just going to Grand Rapids 34 and being like, and you get some honey, and you get where you're playing like Oprah, kind of giving away TVs and cars or whatever?
Well, I actually hoard a lot. My father-in-law's a big, he prepares. And so the honey is kind of like a bartering tool and a sweetener. So we also would like to use that just to sweeten our food. But I have a brother that we do a trade. I give him some of my perhaps less attractive honey, and he gives me back his most attractive mead. So I kind of supply brothers that have different talents that they might need that as an ingredient. I've got some brothers that might, I don't try to go out and sell it, but some brothers might want to buy it every year. And what's nice about it is that it has, health benefits too. It's got small little, um, a little bit of that pollen that people will get allergic to.
Hmm.
Whatever, like during the season you'll be sneezing. So if you're consuming local honey, you're actually building up a resistance to those pollens and those things that are floating through the air. So your allergies usually get improved if you're consuming local honey. And so I kind of keep that in mind. I got brothers that are always have something to do with a recipe. So believe it or not, I have quite a bit of honey, but I'm actually storing it because I just don't know when I'm going to run out, and I love it. And I try to make, my family has a tablespoon of honey every day, just as kind of like a medicinal thing.
So I don't add too many, but if you can do like some small packets when you come to San Antonio, can you check it in your luggage?
I don't know, but I'll try.
Samples, like yeah, maybe think about. Anyway, we'll discuss that. That just made me
I,
think
I,
about
I
it.
might be able to put it in my checked luggage. I'm not sure if I can
Yeah,
carry it on.
yeah, because you can check a lot of things that you can't carry on.
Yep.
So anyway,
We'll
um,
talk about it.
yeah. So kind of in this whole micro segment within this part of the episode, so we've talked about kind of beekeeping, honey and then bees. But let's talk about really the thing that kind of binds us together, that Masonic symbol. It's a religious symbol. It's a philosophy symbol. Beehives. Like, what's the concept kind of symbolically? And this is kind of pen and compass type talk. What's that kind of going back to? And don't give away your whole presentation you're going to do down
Right.
in San Antonio at the Esoteric Summit. But give us a little taste of that. That
Okay.
was sorry. That was a
I gotta
little
be,
much.
I don't want to blow my whole
Just at the high points.
rainstorm. So I think it's important. We use the picture that we use in masonry is basically a very traditional, something they call a skep, which they've been using since ancient Greece. And there's probably still a lot of cultures that still use it. We moved in the late 1800s to like a more productive, because with that beehive behind you, to actually harvest that, you're going to have to destroy all the honeycombs within it. So once they were able, technology developed a way to get honey. It's called the Longstrath hive, where you're not destroying the combs. But I think it's important to realize that even Masonically, I don't think it's an accident that that specific style of beehive was kind of adopted, and we don't really know when the Masons started using it. We just don't know. There's a lot of different organizations. The Odd Fellows used it too. It's part of the Odd Fellow symbolism. So, we know what it says in the ritual, but I think it's also important to realize that that's not a wild beehive. That's actually a beehive that a beekeeper would use. So I don't think it's
It's almost
just
a
about,
created or human influence. It's almost like a tool that we would use also.
well,
I never known that. That's crazy.
yeah. Well, I think that's what's going to be part of the presentation is to kind of understand, first of all, that the Masonic symbols that we're taught in our ritual aren't the end all. Those are just like springboards.
Exactly.
Masonry is kind of giving you, this is how we interpret this, and you are free and welcome to expand on that in what works for you. And what I'm hoping to do with my presentation down in San Antonio is kind of really dig deep into all the different aspects of the beehive. We've got if are you guys using the Preston Webb ritual? Do you guys use the same ritual we do?
Not exactly.
But the beehive, it's
Yeah.
industry, right?
Yeah, right.
Industry.
So, but we have that in a certain section, in a certain attached to a certain degree, and it's in our monitor, and it's all over buildings, and it's etched inside of our Grand Lodge building, and it's not like
Right.
any massive secret, but yeah, it's there for Texas. So yeah,
But I think like any of the Masonic symbols we have, they're usually, we'll mention it real quick what it is. Okay, the gavel bonds people together. The North doesn't have a officer chair, shadowed, whatever. There's things that we can build from that and what that might mean. It might mean something different to each separate brother. And I think the beehive generally, in a worldview, even non-Masonic, most people think of that as a symbol of industry, a symbol as you stay industrious. But there's so many different levels to what that means. It doesn't mean work all the time. It doesn't mean work yourself to the bone. There's different aspects to what that symbol represents. And I think one of them, and as I'm going through and preparing this presentation, the fact that that is a beekeeper's hive. That's not a wild hive. Wild hives, they're in trees, they're in, empty logs. You'll find them all over different places. Sometimes they just hang bare from a branch. I think there's a reason masonically that that is a bee, like a human custodial hive. And I think that's an important word right there is custodianship. And I think in our industry, in our method and pursuit of industriousness, that we are also custodians. We're custodians for the the areas that we are, for the people in our lives. And I think that, and without getting too much into the presentation, I think the beehive has so many wonderful different layers of possible symbolic interpretation. Because I can tell you what, you can't tell me how to interpret something. The person that applies meaning to a symbol is that specific person. Now we can
Now,
give
wait a
you
minute.
some idea.
You're jumping into my presentation.
Oh, sorry.
You're jumping
Email it to me and I'll just read it off right now.
into my book concept. What are you? Wait, that's funny. Anyway, so I think I'm going to jump forward. I was going to ask you another question, but how would you relate the lesson in the beehive, in the queen and the drones and the worker bees and the whole kind of system? How would you relate that to kind of working collaboratively with other Freemasons? Is it almost as a symbol, kind of our direction of, hey, this is the way this works. We could employ that into what we're trying to do in real life.
I think, and it might sound a little bad in a way, there's a certain beauty to the community and to have your priorities be about the community, about a beehive is like a superorganism. It's actually like one big creature that happens to be made up of a bunch of different individuals. The queen, the drones, the workers, they all have their specific job duties. And by themselves, they wouldn't survive by themselves. They have to work together to make this superorganism of a beehive survive. And I think that can be applied to any organization, including the Freemasons. And I think that's one of the things that we see work best is when Masons are in it for the big picture. They're, it's hard for us to shed our own idiosyncrasies, our own selfishness, our own ambitions, but I think Freemasonry kind of teaches us how to mitigate that and how to really work for a larger cause, a larger goal. And sometimes it's time to be the worker. Sometimes it's time to be the queen. Sometimes it's time to be the drone. And you know what I mean? They have different job
Yeah.
descriptions. And without, the queen's in charge of keeping the population alive, keeping the membership of the hive up. The workers, they are the ones that are the serving dinner and they're cleaning up after meetings and they're making
Yeah.
sure that there's a steward in the procession. And then you got the drones. I'm not sure how I want to, maybe I should have thought about that answer a little bit more, but the drones really are there.
No, but they're maybe they're like us. Maybe they're helping with creating
Well, I'll
things.
tell you what, more, and I do agree with that. They're part of the reproductive process. But I think what a lot of people overlook is that without drones, there is no genetic diversity in a hive. The drones incorporate diversity into the hive. So I mean, there's many different ways we could look at that. So I think you need you need a lot of diversity in a lodge as far as that, which is a weird balance because we're all together and we're all trying to do the same thing and
Yeah.
trying to work together. But we also want to give diverse opinions, diverse ideologies, diverse problem-solving strategies. Because without that diversity, we're going to be stuck in one direction and just die out.
Well, I'll give you three quick metaphors. You can't have a symphony with only one type of instrument.
Nope,
You
that's
can't have a
exactly.
harmony with only one note and one tone. And so the same kind of thing. You can't if you only had the queen, there's no honey at the end of the process, right? There's no
Nope.
sweetness.
I'm
So
going to steal that symphony metaphor during my presentation in San Antonio, and I'm
I'm,
going to
I'm,
take
I'm
that.
feeding you. Yeah, we're doing a little work session, by the way, while we're recording.
All right,
Yeah,
good.
this is, we never waste any time. Yeah, we never waste anything. So yeah, I love it. And so yeah, I think, even for me, while you're saying that, I was trying to be quiet enough and wait for my turn to speak. But there's been so many times that I've tried to promote. A lot of times I've been a 25-year Mason, and people will come to me on the side and go, that person, that officer, that junior officer, this person over here, this leader, is not doing something the way I would do it. And I go, isn't that beautiful?
Mm,
Because we all can, and I try especially as a past presiding officer, to be supportive of that person. But if they maybe have something that they're weaker in, that I can come in like a community builder award or some of my skills, that maybe that guy either doesn't have the time or the focus, or he hadn't developed that side of himself. That's something that I can add to it to give us a better experience overall. And there's so many, and what is it? I can't remember. I think it's in which epistle of St. Paul, but he says, some were meant to be pastors, some were meant to be evangelist. They all in the early church, they all had their role. I mean, we can take that for any group, a family. You can take that for a business. You can take any organization. Kind of going back, we're talking about living organism, the whole root word there. And then it goes, you can go the other direction. You can go into the Old Testament, and you can find that in Leviticus, and the way that kind of Moses, once they got themselves out of Egypt, how he had to organize these
mhm.
hundreds of thousands of people that were out there in the desert, and he had to kind of organize them into, and even in medieval Europe, there weren't 80 cobblers and no clockmakers, and there weren't, or there weren't any, everybody was a stonemason, and nobody was a smith or a blacksmith or anything like that. And certain people grew, and they specialized in that. If you go and you look at the tribes of Israel, they all specialized in a certain thing, to where they weren't kind of doubling up or duplicating, except for maybe in the matters of warfare or some other things, right? Worship or whatever. Everybody had their place. And I
Yep.
think sometimes in our modern day, we would be a lot happier if we can just find our place. So, all right, that was a little philosophical add there. Um, so let's go back to kind of your process just a little bit. So, what happens when you're really thinking about your presentation coming up, or one of these other presentations, or you're writing something for the magazines that you've talked about? Like when you're looking at this degree work and the symbolism of something, you're trying to identify the dots and how to connect them and kind of interpret things. How does that look for you? I mean, what do you think you focus on if you've ever?
I guess, I guess there's certain parameters that I always ask about. How much time am I dealing with? What kind of topic? I mean, those are just basic parameters that you want to keep in mind as you're going through. And then once you kind of get a little skeletal idea, then I just brainstorm. I just sit down and write everything that comes to mind about that subject. And it's usually, and hopefully, it's much more than I would ever present in that specific presentation. But that usually, in that brainstorming, any kind of problem solving starts with brainstorming. And so that's when, even bad ideas, you don't edit yourself when you're brainstorming. You just put out anything out there, because that really silly, stupid idea that you don't want to write down might actually trigger a really good idea after you write it down. So the brainstorming, and of course, you gotta be discretionary about how long you allow yourself to brainstorm, because then there's a time to start evaluating, okay, which of these really move this idea forward. But the whole time I'm still keeping it organic and trying to see the true message that I'm trying to convey. It usually rises up as I'm going through all this data. And eventually, once I get this kind of clear story that I want to tell, even though it might have started out one way, it usually has something to do with the original intent, but it's usually evolved into something a little bit different and something a little bit more distilled or coalesced. And then I start working, okay, now how do I want to tell the story? I mean, where do I want to end up? What's the important parts? So a lot of the stuff I do are PowerPoints, and I will just literally go through and say, what's the reasonable sequence of how I want to present this? You don't want to necessarily start in the middle of a story, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't want to start the presentation with the end. You can use that as a shock statement and then work your way backwards. It's just all about style. And you don't want to forget some of the liberal sciences or liberal arts that we teach in the fellowcraft. Rhetoric. Rhetoric's a big part of presenting for education to try to get people to listen to you. I'm not really sure if I'm trying to convince people. I want to be a credible source of information. And if they have an expanded understanding of the subject I'm talking about I feel it's been completely successful. If they look at something a little bit differently than they did before I was talking, I think it's been a success. They might not be on board with me, but if I was able to adjust their perception a little bit, I feel pretty good about it. And you can usually tell by the questions they ask. So I'm not sure if that's an answer to your question about process, but then I just kind of
No,
redo it.
no,
I take a lot of
uh,
time on it. I go back and edit. I look at how the wording is, or if this specific image is appropriate. Is there a better image I can use that conveys it?
yeah.
A lot of stuff like that.
There's a lot of what I do in there. I agree with you that you can't um you gotta let it flow. You just gotta let the there's a country song from like the 80s. You gotta let the love you just gotta let your love flow. You just gotta let it kind of for me, I mean that's whenever things just get kind of out there in a good way. So but
That's,
yeah, I totally, huh?
I'm going to interject just real quick. What I've also found is that I have to allow myself, and this sounds a little strange, but I allow myself to fall in love with the subject matter, even if I'm not interested originally, because I think I'm able to speak about things I'm in love with much more enthusiastically than things that feel like a task.
I agree. Excitement, enthusiasm,
Yep,
energy, almost like fervor or fever.
yep,
Um, those kind of things. That's passion.
yep.
People are drawn to or magnets of passion. So yeah. So speaking of that, let's talk about passions. So you have a. I'm almost jealous. I don't know exactly what you did before you were being the director of the Michigan Masonic Library Museum.
Museum and library.
I think I actually said it correctly that time. So only took two segments and little over an hour of recording for me to nail that one. But so if you let's kind of talk about what you were kind of opening up a little bit. If you had the time just to go into that process, your true self, and you could just kind of take away all the worldly things that you have to do, whether it be for kind of what you do for a living or just kind of even mowing the yard. Now, beekeeping, we let you keep that as a distraction, but everything else kind of in the material world just kind of be taken away. And what could you like focus on from there? Which you kind of have that because that's what you do for a living to a certain extent. But what would you probably say would be that focus?
Well, I mean, like you said, I actually do something I really love doing. And so I'm not even sure if I want to say it out loud. I'd probably do it for free. I'm not a volunteer, I'm a paid employee, but
Right.
I don't want that to get out that I'd do it for free. And I would probably, the issue is I have so many different interests, and that's a problem with kind of being interested in everything is that I could sink my teeth into spending time repairing old manual typewriters, spending my time painting, spending my time writing. I probably would like to do some more writing, and I'd like to kind of work towards developing more. I love educating in masonry. I'd probably expand that ability because at the museum and library, there's certain things that I shouldn't say bind me in, but there's certain responsibilities at a museum and library that I have to do that are museum and library related. So those do detract from the actual like creative and educational aspects. I try to fit them in as much as I can. That's what the PowerPoints I can kind of involve that those take writing, those take, you know, problem solving. They take all sorts of great creative things. And I think anything that's got something to do with some kind of creative energy is going to pull me towards that as something I want to spend my spare time on.
So you start writing books,
I would probably start writing books.
and yeah, and kind of go on maybe a lecture circuit that's related.
I would love to do
Both of us. Yeah, anybody that wants to hire both of us to do that,
that. Yeah.
I'll do it in
We'll carpool.
I'll do it in certain latitude. Well, you can fly me anywhere in the world. Just hand me a ticket and make sure I have a nice, clean place to stay, or at least
Right.
not even clean, just a nice, just a roof over my head,
Yep.
maybe a place to shower and brush my teeth or something. That's awesome. Well, Rodney, I'm gonna invite you in on this segment if you want to come back on camera and unmute because I want to give you an opportunity because Rodney has a lot of awesome esoteric insights. What do you want to ask Dirk about beekeeping?
I guess if you want to just keep it kind of vague, because I know this is probably part of your presentation at the summit in San Antonio. Uh, what would you say, like some vague esoteric symbolism of the beehive would be right off the bat?
See, that's the thing is the term esoteric
Yeah,
is real super general. I mean, language is esoteric, writing is esoteric.
it is.
Um,
I guess just under the surface level of that beehive, or maybe even more of like a spiritual aspect of what it is.
well, I'll tell you what. Um, this is, I find it very interesting that bees communicate a lot through vibration. And so, without laying my cards on the table, I think there's certain things. Let's pick some of the like Hermetic books um, that might have different ideas about um, harmonics or vibrations. So I think on a traditional, and I don't want to say a traditional esoteric idea, but when people are talking about esotericism, they're usually Masons are usually talking about like perhaps veiled knowledge or underneath underneath a little bit. You got to do some digging. That's basically what esotericism is, the understanding, the meaning that you got to dig a little bit for. It's not for everybody. You get the people that are willing to dig are going to find it.
Right.
So I do find it very interesting and a good thing that the beehive isn't just that live an industrious life thing on the cover. I mean, we can pull in the Egyptians never really used the beehive in their hieroglyphics, but they used the bee.
Mhm.
So those are things that we can pull in, and we know that they were beekeeping. So they had beehives available, but why didn't they add it to their hieroglyphics? Who knows? But there's so many things about any kind of symbol, not just the beehive, that if you are willing to look at it and not be tied to a specific interpretation or a specific angle. I think esotericists, by their very nature, have to look at things from different angles. They have to look at things from different perspectives in order to learn about them.
Right. Well, I can see it just from my lens of alchemy. Um, Bees can tie in as a really good symbol of immortality, specifically with the symbolism of honey or the creation of honey.
Honey doesn't go bad.
Exactly. It's like the only source of food that has no expiration date. So they're almost creating somewhat of a philosopher's stone there.
Yeah, and I tell you what, what's honey? They call it like liquid gold. So I
Mhm.
mean, that's got some alchemical aspects to it. And I also think it's interesting that a hive, if you look at the hive as a whole, the actual individuals will have lifespans. But if everything goes well under the perfect conditions, the hive is eternal. It will keep going forever. I mean, it's going to keep going with a different queen, different. I mean, the bees only live 6 weeks. They're going to die after 6 weeks, but the hive
Right.
is going to survive for an undetermined amount of time. So I find that very interesting too.
Yeah, there's a good parallel there with Freemasonry as a whole, like how old the fraternity is, and it goes through different phases and cycles, but at its core, it's still the same.
Yep.
So, do y'all see the big grin on my face, the big smile? Because I am sitting here going, I got the opportunity to shape our agenda, our itinerary, like how we're going to speak and who's going to speak and building up to all that. And one of the last segments of the San Antonio Esoteric Summit that we're all going to, the three of us are going to be at, plus three or four other guys, is I'm going to get out of the way. And Rodney, Derek, TJ Brumfeld, RJ Johnson, Ben Williams, y'all are going to have this kind of opportunity just to talk about stuff in front of a crowd of 50 plus people.
Better
Um,
put us on a timer.
Oh yeah, definitely.
we have, but there's going to be the opportunity for you guys what I'm calling a jam session.
Yeah.
We don't really know what y'all are going to talk about that day. You know, some of it's going to be maybe reviewing other people's presentations, or kind of like Rodney jumping on here and getting a chance to ask you questions about beekeeping, or us to ask RJ about esoterics, or TJ about Kabbalah, or all those type of things, or maybe you know just audience, and it's going to be a really great. I think it's going to be different than a lot of other educational events, symposiums, and things, to really kind of have that freestyle jam session that you would have in music.
Cool.
Yeah, it'll be a fun time riffing
So
off each
I
other.
just gotta here again. I'm gonna say it again. I guess got a little taste of that metaphorically uh, in this recording. So awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to end segment two. We're going to come back and talk about Masonic education more. Some more about the fraternity of Freemasonry, as well as more about the Esoteric Summit, and a few other areas of interest. So this ends segment and part two of Dirk Hughes on Pen and Compass. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Patrick Carr. I'm the author of the book Working Tools, Guide to Transforming Your Masonic Experience. Just want to let you know that our book is available now through Amazon.com. It's $14.95 in its softback edition. It's also $9.95 for a Kindle edition. The idea of the book is to enable you, the member of a Masonic Lodge, to be able to look at some things that we've tried and have become tried and true methods of increasing your ability to have a much better Masonic experience. The book includes everything from how to plan leadership when you have the opportunity to serve your lodge as master, or any other of the appendant bodies. But really, it's aimed at helping you create a Masonic experience in your lodge that's long lasting, true, and enjoyable. We hope that you enjoy the book. We hope that you're able to use it to make your experience much better. God bless.
Hey, we're back for segment three. We're really excited to have Dirk Hughes with us tonight on Pen and Compass, with Rodney co-hosting, myself, Jeff Bennett. And we're going to delve into some different subject matter. We've kind of been talking about it a little bit. We're going to get more specific about Dirk's vision, kind of in the realm of Masonic education. That's literally what he does that's his vocation. That's his paid gig that he has every day or most days of the week or whatever. And kind of his definition of that. So take it away, Dirk, and explain to us kind of what you envision for Masonic education.
Well, there's different layers to that, and there's different substance to it. There's different methods. I think Masonic education is, to me, one of the most important things about Freemasonry. I think I've always thought that Freemasonry is an educational system. A lot of guys will say it's a fraternity first and foremost. I personally think it's an educational system first and foremost. And it happens to be a fraternity. I think that's an important aspect of that educational system. So, like any kind of educational system, there are so many different strategies, so many different opinions on how best to convey that. But the important thing is to make sure you're doing it. You don't want to, I wouldn't fall into the trap of ever thinking that education is not important to the fraternity or important to your lodge. Even if it's something small, even if it's something just a little effort, a little movement of ignorance to light is going to work. So I think guys get a little intimidated. I mean, people that don't know a lot about education get intimidated with what that's involved. They don't think they have the time to develop a lesson plan. They don't have time to make a PowerPoint. What they don't realize is that just giving somebody advice is education. A little comment, a comment of support is education. So, I mean, those are philosophical ideas on how we,
Sharing knowledge. They all have knowledge and opinions, for sure.
yeah,
They all have noses and opinions.
yep. And I think it's good to listen to other people's opinions to kind of get different
That's
perspectives. We want to make sure it's real information. We want to try to be as reasonable and factual as possible. What we have to do is be, and I'm going to get into like this philosophical idea of facts. You know, we need to understand that facts are observable and they have to have been observed. Facts don't happen in the future. I mean, that's the literal idea of a fact is it has to have been observed. So future things are really just things that we can be highly confident of the likelihood of it happening because of the fact that it's happened in the past. Does that make sense?
yeah, based on past performance.
Yep. So what we really want to do is when we're giving information, we want to try to make it as factual as possible. And we want to give any kind of interpretation of future likelihoods to be as reasonable and based on as much evidence as possible, or qualify it that this is my opinion, because that's also education. Giving somebody your opinion on something is a way for them to see a different perspective, but you want to make sure they know that's what they're getting. So, especially with education, I think it's highly important that we try to keep it real. We try to keep it as objective as possible without any kind of ulterior motive. Persuasion and all those things are different. That's not necessarily education. You can incorporate education into persuasion, but education in and of itself is more of a presentation. I guess you could kind of say you're trying to persuade them to believe you, but I think as Freemasons, and if we do our education right, we kind of deal in the currency of trust. Other brothers should be trusting us to be giving them the right the true information. I mean, theoretically. So there's a certain level of trust there. So I think we also have to be open to the idea that things have worked in the past. The ritual, I think, is an important part of education. And I don't think that we'll ever find a way to push a button and get what we get out of ritual by doing it the way we've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. Or,
You don't think human beings are going to change over the last 1,000 years? You don't think they're
well,
you
I mean,
can't predict the future, but yeah, they've been this way for a long, long time, and they kind of men still kind of learn in an experiential way the best.
I don't expect you and me getting to the point where we can telepathically share information over the next thousand, I just don't think that's in the
But that'd
AI is
still
a
be an
little bit.
experience, right?
Yeah,
That'd still be that kind of thing. I
yeah,
mean, it'd still be kind of person to person, being to
yeah.
being. So
But I think there's ways that we can encourage the use of new technologies and new platforms in order to communicate that in different ways, different aspects of that. I really don't ever think it's a good idea to say, okay, you're going to watch this ritual on TV. Here, we're going to initiate you, sit in front of this television, you're going to plug in the entered apprentice degree. I just don't see that as something that we should be doing. I think that very tactile, face-to-face living moment of initiation is highly, highly important for the emotional impact that it has. Even if you had a really wonderful virtual reality headset and it appeared to be real. I think if you knew you were wearing a virtual reality headset, it would still detract from the emotional impact of that because you know that you're watching it on a virtual reality headset. I'm going off on a tangent, but I
yeah,
hope you know what I mean.
yeah,
But
and
go ahead.
and right, and a lot of times they're like, well, and even some guys that have gotten to a certain level, they're like, or if they're not in a certain portion of Freemasonry, and they're like, well, I've got access to a ritual and I've read through it, and and I have a lot of I love ritual scripts, and I have a lot of them, and they're in plain English except for little portions. Well, guess what? I don't really fully understand that because I've never experienced that. And no one's ever conveyed that to me, the secret work or the modes of recognition or whatever. And I don't know what that just single letter or that kind of symbol means or whatever on that page. and I still don't really kind of understand, especially to the level of, I can read through it, but then you have to go talk to someone from that jurisdiction or someone that's been initiated into that to really say those things. And we were talking about going to different jurisdictions. We don't have our stewards, and especially the way y'all do it in Michigan, because I've experienced different degree work. Right, I've been to, I think, inter-apprentice, maybe a fellow craft. I know I've been in inter-apprentice degrees, and I was like, yeah, that are like other types of Freemasonry that I'm a member of, not the Blue Lodge. So going back to educate, like you're saying, different groups should be doing education, but what would that look like? Because sometimes when you say education, people have their own dictionary in their head and they say, oh, yeah, teaching them the ritual. Or, yeah, they need to learn their stuff to become the next level. If there's a progression from maybe entered apprentice to fellow, when they're a candidate, right? They're joining the first time. Or they're like, yeah, I think everybody needs to go through the leadership course, or everybody needs to learn how, what the laws of the Grand Lodge are. I mean, those are all educational things, but do you think that's where do you think kind of the time and place for those things are, and how would those be different than maybe what you'd be promoting?
I don't think those are bad things. I think none of that stuff is bad. No attempt is bad, but we don't want to confuse different styles of teaching with different styles of learning. And we can't just assume that everybody learns the same way. That's like the challenge of a teacher, is finding how a specific student learns. Some people read, some people watch, some people play. You can learn things through playing, you know? So, I mean, as an educator, half the battle is finding out specific students' learning styles. We can't really do that, I guess, practically as Freemasons. So we might have to put a bunch of different styles out there. We might have to have a leadership seminar, but we also at the same time might want to make sure that that stuff is available in different platforms. I think it's important that we follow the trends of technology today. I think social media is very important, and I think we should be using every opportunity, whether it be a podcast. I think these are really great things and important. Um, whether it be TikTok videos, YouTube videos, there can be all sorts games. I was talking to a brother. That's one of those examples of giving presentations to different jurisdictions. There's a brother from York Grand Lodge in Mexico that after the presentation I gave that group, he sat with me and they're working out like a game that's tied to masonry,
Yeah.
where they
There's
can
games
walk.
in the Royal Arch. One of the Grand High Priests. Well, actually, right as we went into COVID, we had kind of a fake game show. It's kind of like the Family Feud meets Jeopardy, and whenever we were doing it in person, I even did it online. We would have three on the gold team and three on the red team, and I would go through and they'd kind of have to buzzer in or whatever, and had a scorekeeper and all, and had like a fake persona like Zeb Arbel, if you get that reference there, and but like that, like kind of just this whole kind of TV game show type thing or whatever, and it was, and then there were 3 rounds and all this kind of stuff, and they had to, and I knew probably who knew the answers to all this, and I set all those people on the sidelines in the audience, and I asked the guys that didn't know, and it was going to be a challenge for them maybe to get all the answers and to gain points and stuff, and it wasn't to embarrass them, it was to make everybody else in the room, not just like one guy going deep, I know everything, deep, I know everything, that's boring, and everybody would have shut down after what, the third, fourth, fifth question that he answered
Yep.
without even having to think about it. And so I think there's different ways that you can gain people's. But I also was doing that. I was the warm up band. I was the opening act, and or excuse me, I was right in the middle, and I would do this and then hand it over, and everybody's kind of engaged, and they're hopefully they've been thinking and challenged and there's some humor going on in the room. And then the Grand High Priest would get up and he gave an amazing talk about kind of like in the ocean, the characteristics of a shark and how that kind of transforms into, your leadership style or your opportunities for your role in a lodge and how you can kind of be a shark. So it was a really cool, open thing that you're not going to hear is the same old, same old. We need to get new members and we need to get more money. So
Yeah, have you ever, and even like video games, let's say, because we had a couple boxes at the museum of like a board game that was about Freemasonry. So I see what that was trying to do. But it could be something. Are you familiar with I'm not even sure if it's around anymore. It's called Myst. My wife really loved this game. It was like a puzzle solving game where you walked through these kind of fantastic landscapes and you had to solve puzzles by turning things on in certain sequence and things like that. So, I mean, you could incorporate a Masonic Lodge room, King Solomon's Temple, any number of different Masonic laden symbols with being an environment for a video game. And then as you work your way through the video game, you're actually like learning other things. Let's say you have a video game that deals specifically with like middle chamber. So as far as education, I think that we want to explore any number of different opportunities. We don't want to just stick with the traditional methods. And I think that's one of the might be a challenge for Freemasonry because it is an extremely traditional organization. I actually say, and I try to give the caveat when I say that Freemasonry is a conservative organization, I don't mean politically. I mean, there's conservative guys, other guys in there, but I'm not talking about politically. I'm talking about that it's really slow to change. It's conservative in its changing. That's why we've lasted for hundreds of years because we are so slow to change. But we do change. I mean, I can almost guarantee you guys have made some changes to your ritual, to your laws, your blue book. But I also think that we want to make sure that we're kind of looking at ways of changing the ability to reach new brothers and older brothers with new methods of education. And it might be tapping into technologies, tapping into social media opportunities, video, gaming, um, non-traditional music. There's all sorts of different ways that are non-traditional that we can tap into teaching brothers all sorts of stuff. I mean, I can only imagine what could be done with just kind of exploring an attack on magic flute, just kind of going to see an opera and having some kind of discussion afterwards and kind of pulling out all of the Masonic symbolism that Mozart put into that opera. I mean, they're probably well documented, but you might want to give like a precursor before guys and take them to the opera. Okay, look for this stuff when you go to the opera of Mozart. And then you have a discussion afterwards, have a panel discussion afterwards. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. And so how do I see it?
yeah.
I don't have a concrete way of seeing it. I see it right now, it's just kind of a cloud of possibility. And I think we need to kind of pull things out of that.
So I've got an opportunity in the Royal Arch in Texas, and then later this summer in the Allied Masonic degrees, especially in the Order of Secret Monitor, which deals with the biblical story of David and Jonathan of the Old Testament. And we're going to do all the degree work that the average member in the AMD can receive and is allowed to have. In the morning, there's 3 different degrees that we're going to do. We break for lunch, and in the afternoon, myself and probably some other people will be coming back and we'll be breaking down that and interpreting that symbolism.
When you doing
And
that?
then we're doing that in Houston the last Saturday in August.
Okay.
It's Order of Secret Monitor Day, kind of different. And they did they wanted to do something. They had gotten permission, and they did the first 3 grades at the Order Scarlet Cord, which the Order Secret Monitor goes back into that. So they're trying to promote kind of this. Here's kind of the whole systematic in these 6 degrees that you have access to if you're a member of that group. And this is how it all kind of binds together, especially the way the Order of Secret Monitor, the Order of Scarlet Cord came out of the Secret Monitor, and then also ritualistically, biblical, history-wise, how it all binds together and weaves together in one mosaic. And so it's exciting. And I got approached about this, and I said, yeah, I'm available on this schedule on that, and they did that. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Houston Scottish building, but they have a virtual 360 projection system that the walls are the backdrops,
Oh, wow.
and then you do everything theater in the round instead of it being on traditional kind of, because it's a more modern building. It actually is a building that was built to it had a production company in it before that, and so they have a big, huge control room, and it's an amazing place, recording booths and all kinds of stuff there.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm excited to. First of all, my first uh, looking forward to that is just being around the awesomeness of the members and the guys that'll be there. I know a lot of them down there. Anyway, I'm kind of going off on talking about myself, but let's talk about something we're doing together. So we've referenced it on June 7th, 2025. It's April 2025 when we're doing this. In a couple months, you're coming down along with uh, RJ Johnson, Whence Came You podcast, TJ Brumfeld out of Nebraska, our own Rodney McGilvery out of Indiana, Ben Williams out of Colorado, and then there's some guys from Texas that are also Frank Zepp and Jason Reichenberg and myself that are involved with an event called the San Antonio Esoteric Summit. And so I contacted you and was blessed to get a chance to invite some of my bestest Estes BFFs Masonically down to Texas from some states that we don't generally have people come in and speak because a little bit of a distance. And 50 people are going to be in participation. There's 50 tickets and they're on sale. And so when I came to you the concept, what excited you about it? What are you looking forward to, and kind of the essence of what we're going to get hopefully a chance to knock it out and make it happen.
Well, first of all, the exciting thing was coming down to San Antonio and seeing you. I thought that was cool. I like presenting, and I like that sounded like an awesome thing. Like, yeah, I'll do it. Um, and of course, I've kind of been drawn. I've been involved with research lodges, and my research lodge is really big into like esoteric pursuits. We talk alchemy, hermeticism, Jungian psychology, you name it. I mean, we're
Thank you.
exploring
That's
all
the
sorts of.
and that's kind of the central focus of this. That's why it's an esoteric summit. That's why that was about the best label we could come up with, instead of, hey, a day of blah blah blah, these 19 different hermetic philosophies. But yes, keep
And I
going.
think, and I think that's what a lot of the brothers are really looking for, a little bit more in-depth understanding of the fraternity. Not that I want to go off track on here, but I think we need, I've given up looking for truth a long time ago. It's just like the ashlar. The truth is like a perfect ashlar. It's not destined for me as a human being. But I think what esoteric pursuits and looking into Freemasonry at a deeper level, I'm totally on board with seeking clarity. I might not seek truth anymore, but I'm seeking clarity that will get me closer to an understanding of the best possible truth I can wrap my head around as a human being. So I mean, I'm cool with that. And I think a lot of the times people will ask me when I'm going off track. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but people will ask me about, like, well, does Freemasonry teach you such and such? And I'm like, well, not necessarily teach you that, but it's going to hook you up with people that might have the same interests, that might have the same cracks in their understanding, and understand the idea and the beauty of uncertainty and the beauty of trying to become more clear on understanding those uncertainties. It's I'm going to go off on the shadowed north. I mean, the shadowed north to me is an example of the idea. I'm not sure if you guys call it the shadowed north
We
or
call the North in the down here in Texas and other places in the South. We along the Gulf Coast of whatever you want to call the part next. We call that a place of darkness.
place of darkness.
And I think that goes back to about the 1860s, probably, when we adopted that language.
Well, I tell you what, to me, that's one of those things that I've built on, that if I'm lodge rooms to me represent King Solomon's temple. I think Freemasons metaphorically represent King Solomon's temple. And that means we each have a place of darkness within us. And you don't have to accept darkness. You don't have to take it as like malicious. It's a place that needs light. So I think we as human beings, if we accept the fact that there's always a dark north within us that could use more light, that we're always going to be open up to new ideas and new perspectives. And I think that's to me, one of the most beautiful things about Freemasonry is the ability to say that I don't know everything and I'm going to try to learn more stuff.
And funny, 10 years ago, I was doing Wood Badge Boy Scout leadership training, adult leadership training. And I got tasked with doing a presentation. It was kind of scripted, but I could interpret it kind of my own way on the blind spot. And I think you just basically you said in Freemasonry, we have the concept of a blind spot. There's going to be something that you don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
So, and I think going back to tying this into why are we talking about the esoteric summit is because there's going to be things that day we don't know what we don't know. And even in this conversation and the other episodes of Pen and Compass, there's things that come up and I'm like, man, that helped me unpack something myself, or I see what he was talking about there. And I think that's the thing, kind of going back to Masonic education, we need to do less formalized, and we need to basically just say, here's something, a topic, or I have some things that you'll see this summer. I have some things that I do that just like give somebody just enough to start them. You ever been to a party where they have like, you have to fill out these questions, like maybe 5 questions or something, then everybody has to they read them out, and then you're trying to guess, oh, that's Dirk, that's Rodney, that's RJ, and you want those kind of conversation starters. And then, after in a social thing, and I hope even at the Esoteric Summit, the way we're trying to design this to be really intimate is that afterwards you get to say, hey, in the break, you want to be like, hey, RJ, I didn't know you knew that, or like, tell me more about that. Or people come up to you and go, man, I think you inspired me today. Give me your guide down in Georgia. I need to go get 3,000 bees and a queen, and I'm ready to, like, where do I go buy my, oh, by the way, your beehive shapes are those little, like I've seen out in the country and stuff, like are they like square cubes?
Yeah, like the square cubes.
With like drawers or whatever on them, or lids, or however.
They look like drawers, but they're actually they're
Panels.
they're kind of like they're stacked. They're called supers, and they're stacked supers. And inside those boxes are frames that the bees will build on and put honey on there. So they're not drawers. You actually have to take off the top. But if you look at the top, you're going to see a bunch of frames inside.
Yeah.
Usually 10, sometimes 8.
Yeah, like a hanging file.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, well, and going back to jumping real quick back to segment 2 that we did, and the form that behind me versus modern day. Wow, a cube. That's not anything esoterically symbolic or anything. It's like, wow, all these perfect squares and right angles. Imagine that. That doesn't sound very Freemasonic, does it? So, that's a joke, everybody. It is.
I laugh.
It's very, very symbolic. It's very much feeding into just the basics. So, all right. So here's some questions that I ask on every episode. Do you consider yourself a mystic?
Yes. And if I'm meaning
That, however you want to define it,
Yeah.
that's your own interpretation.
I think a mystic really is anybody that deliberates and anyone that self-reflects and reflects on the universe around them. I find them a mystic. I don't think a mystic, some people are going to apply a definition that has a little bit more of like a Rasputin kind of Gandalf feel, whatever to it. I think just about anybody that has an inquisitive mind can probably equate themselves with being a mystic, someone who doesn't stop at the perhaps fabricated certainties of certain ways of understanding things. Someone who digs a little deeper, who looks at it from different perspectives, who isn't ever really probably completely satisfied with an answer. They might use that answer until some more comes along, enable that enables them to build on that answer and make it more unified or whatever. So I would think of all you guys as mystics.
So I would even, I think where you were trying to go with that, it's kind of like I know the wind exists because it's air that I can feel that's moving. I don't have to see it to believe that it's there and call it wind.
Right, and there's many different ways to understand the wind. You can understand the wind poetically on how it makes you feel. You can understand it scientifically to see exactly how it happens. Those are all mystical traditions that you can follow to find out what the wind means to you. I'm completely on board with that.
Yeah, looking deep. I think for me, a lot of times it's kind of funny whenever I ask that. People, oh, I'm not like this. I'm like, no, that's that's what you think. That's okay, you know. And they're like, no, I'm not a mystic. I'm like, well, okay. Well, you know, I see some mystic kind of hermit-like, just contemplative things, and so with that, I think I thought I had it in here. Maybe I didn't type the note. Let's just take a quick divergence and tell me about our buddy in common, Chuck Dunning from Texas and Oklahoma, and he's you've met him and you'll get to hang out, and that was one of the first things you talked to me about when we were talking about when you and I met in Michigan,
Well, I
2000.
figured you were both from Texas, so you had to know each other. I didn't realize Texas was a pretty big state. So I'm like, do you
Yeah,
know Chuck Dunning?
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
actually, this kind of goes into our mystical talk as well, because I met Chuck a few years back. I think it was 2018. We were dealing with John Fetzer was a Freemason out of Kalamazoo,
Mm-hmm.
and he was Fetzer Broadcasting, owned the Detroit Tigers for a long time. He was really a conservative guy on the outside, but on the
Mm-hmm.
inside, I would say he was very much a mystic.
Mm-hmm.
He was interested in studying telekinesis and channeling and the
The
paranormal.
Quest of the New Age, is that his book?
I think that might be his book.
I think I've got a copy of it sitting over here, given to me by an Austin area Freemason a couple of years ago.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So he was actually really big into, just a real quick aside on Fetzer. For an example, he owned the Tigers, he owned Fetzer Broadcasting. When he sold those, he became a very wealthy man. But what he did with his money is he created the Fetzer Institute that was kind of designed to fund scientific efforts that probably couldn't get funded under traditional ways. Studies in ESP, studies in telekinesis, studies in channeling. For example, Edgar Mitchell, he was a member of the Institute of Noetic Sciences on Apollo 14. And one of the things a lot of people don't realize what was going on that capsule was that Edgar Mitchell was doing experiments on how weightlessness impacts ESP. And no, NASA wasn't paying for that. Because I tell you what, the general public, if they found out those experiments were going on in the capsule, and the first thought's going to be, I don't want my taxes. Well, your taxes weren't paying for that. John Fetzer was paying for that. So anyway, I'm the Fetzer Memorial Trust. John had died back in 1991, but the Fetzer Memorial Trust was going to be losing. They had some money they had to get rid of before they disappeared. So they got a bunch of us down in Alexandria, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., some authors, some people that were um, educators. I was lucky enough to be from Michigan, and I was lucky enough to be the director of the museum and library. So I kind of by default got involved with this. But one of the things I wanted to do was bring in a bunch of minds that I thought would make a really good dynamic. And one of those guys was Chuck Dunning. I like reached out to Chuck and I said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming down to this workshop? And we're gonna try to work out Masonic education and find out, kind of develop some idea about Masonic education." A number of different brothers. I mean, that's how I met Angel Miller. Am I pronouncing his last name
Hmm?
right?
Millar, I think maybe he's like
Millar.
Millar. Yeah.
Timothy Hogan was there.
Yeah.
That's how I
Yeah.
met RJ.
Yeah.
Akram Elias. I could name drop too. But there's like 25 guys there for a week. And Chuck, what was really beautiful, we would go for a workshop during the day, and then at night we'd go to dinner. And
It's the
that's
Inklings, man. It's like that's like what I'm trying to create all the time. To like get the most interesting people you can find in the same room.
Yep. And I tell you what,
Together.
it was those dinners that we really had opportunities to get to know the other brothers and really talk about Masonic education. The workshop was wonderful, but the workshop was manipulated. A brother by the name of Russell Bishop, he wasn't a brother at the time. He actually joined Freemasonry after he conducted his workshops out in California. So you spend a week with a bunch of guys at a workshop, at dinner, maybe having a glass of wine or perhaps an old fashioned, you never know. But I mean, you that really does loosen not only the tongues and the minds, but it really breaks down any kind of boundaries of you're there with brothers, so it's low risk. You know these guys are going to be open to different, I know, experimental ideas, let's say, or contemplations that you may have had that you never really bounced off somebody else. So this is actually before Chuck wrote his book. And I'm not saying that he wrote it because of that week, but it doesn't surprise me of some of the things that he's writing because Chuck impressed me to no end and I fell in love with the man and I feel like I'm a friend of his. We don't see each other a lot, we don't talk a lot, but I do feel that next, whenever I see him that we're brothers. So that's kind of my experience with Chuck. I've talked to him a few times, but we spent a very concentrated, very dynamic, um, intellectual week with each other. But not just the two of us. There was like 25 really cool brains.
Yeah.
I was the only one slowing people down.
That was my job in Michigan in July of 2023. The the red-coated, red-necked roadblock. Speed bump.
We had to speak in code when we were around you.
Well, yeah, that was a tough presentation because I'm doing my normal kind of roll arch chapter council. This is the next steps if you want to get into a different group that kind of extends what we're doing here without trying to say be condescending about it
Right.
of kind of my position and my opportunity and trying to be inspirational without kind of down talk, mansplaining them too much about it and trying to excite. So I think that was fun. So my interaction with Chuck, I'm a member of the Fort Worth Scottish Rite Valley, fun, fantastic, fabulous Fort Worth Scottish Rite, and think you know or know of Brad Billings, which is now our current Grand Secretary in Texas. He's active member for many years, about 10 years ago or so, and was very involved. Him and Chuck came up with concept. I think we borrowed it from Guthrie, Oklahoma Scottish Rite Valley, and they do kind of what I was describing in the where you put on a degree and then you go and you break it down and you explain it. You let people discuss it and you really think about what's going on in that degree. And so I was on the 24th degree team in Texas, which is a very comparative religion degree. And we did it in full costume, and we have like a 4-story building. Just kind of give you a little bit of backstory. And you go up one elevator, get your costume on, go across the dressing area, go down an elevator, get your mic on, go through the backstage, do your degree, take the group photo, walk off this way. It's just because we're doing all 29 degrees of the Southern Jurisdiction Scottish Rite over 3 weekends.
Wow.
And so love it. And so in between, in like the fall and the spring, I think in the spring we did the evens, and in the fall we did the odds. So in between that, for the members, not the candidates, but for the members to understand the 26th degree, the 24th, the 13th, kind of the non-terminal ones that you don't maybe see all the time. And you kind of, maybe you didn't even see because you went through like me in a term, like just a shorter reunion and didn't see all the degrees. But it was a way for us to say this, I think we called it a ladder of education. And so Chuck had the 24th degree. And so here's the experience I had one day. I got to be in a degree had been studying it, memorizing my lines. Got to watch the whole thing. My part wasn't very big, and I kind of came on stage, did something, and then went off. And so I was watching the whole degree. Billy Hamilton, I think you may know him. He's just written a couple of books. He's out of Texas, and he and I live kind of in the Fort Worth, Arlington part of Dallas Fort Worth. Gabe Yagish, who's there's a lot of Rit Moore. There are a lot of us that are on that they have their own podcast and in Fort Worth 148. But going with that, we go upstairs. I get out of my costume. I come back down to the second floor into the library, and Chuck's in this presentation or about to start it, I think. And I got to sit there and for him to explain to me and go back through the degree. And I'm just sitting there, my blood's running down my chin because I'm sitting there trying not to like talk but I'm just like exploding because there's so much like, how cool is this? I was in the degree, and then I come back and we get to talk about it, and not only with just anybody, but with Chuck. And you learn so much and everything, and I think I also got to do that with him for the 13th degree, which I was a member of that also,
Wow.
which is about the Royal Arch of Solomon, and I love anything pertaining to the Royal Arch and all that symbolism and Legends of Enoch and all those type of things. So anyway, yeah, Chuck is a content, and I've adopted some of the way I look at Freemasonry in my interpretive Freemason concept that I have, and I've kind of started with you've got to have that contemplation to get to the interpretation. I think you're kind of saying some of the same things. I think
Yeah, we actually, I'm not sure if we did this after Chuck wrote his book or not, but like our research lodges, we'll take moments. Either the guys will meet before lodge meeting. I don't know if your research lodges, our research lodges meet once every 4 months, 4 times a year. And we'll get together and make sure we have a meditative moment before we even open lodge, or sometimes the guys will get together a little earlier than the gavel time and meditate, because that's kind of getting ready for that contemplative aspect of a lodge meeting.
yeah,
So I think that can be incorporated.
yeah, and I know of lodges in Texas and Oklahoma because of his influence, Robert G. Davis, aka Bob Davis, those kind of influences, yes.
Yep.
And it's definitely there's not every lodge is the same gig. And so we'll keep going. So would you label or describe yourself as an esotericist?
Yep. You want more?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yes.
Yes, I
And
would.
why? Yes, and why?
And it's almost on the same level as the mystic question, because I do think there's so many esoteric things. In a sense, Masonically, when we're talking, well, first of all, we say the esoteric work. We use that word as the modes or methods of recognition. That's the esoteric work, the secrets. So I'm not necessarily, we're not trying to use that word specifically for that thing, but we have to understand what esotericism is and what esoteric studies are. And it isn't in any particular direction. And even the word, like say, the word occult flips people out. They use the word occult for malicious kind of things. And really, occult just means like the veiled, the hidden. And I mean, it all depends on how you want to use it. I can't tell you how you want to define a word, but the simple fact is words they're like symbols. Words are symbols, and those are esoteric. Language is
So,
esoteric.
as you said, occult, and I thought about maybe how I've transitioned on the definition of that word, and I think about kind of almost what's behind me in the shape. There would be an oculus at the top of that, where there would be one point, which is kind of the same root word. There would be one point where light would be shining down to the very bottom,
Right.
and you could discover things within.
Yep.
So,
And I think that's what esotericism is just trying to discover those things that are harder. They're not on the surface. And you have to either dig metaphorically. Sometimes hidden treasure is esoteric. It's underneath the dirt.
yeah.
And it's just really the method of extracting that treasure from the ground is different from tradition to tradition. It might be studying languages. It might be studying different um, books. I mean, I can't recommend enough. You get into like the Divine Pymander or the Emerald Tablet, and then those are esoteric books, not in and of themselves, but in what you get out of them and what you can see from them. They're not gonna. I don't think they're gonna. There's no revelatory. There's no revelations in these books that like. There's no real aha or eureka moment. They create cracks in your certainty that lets new light in. I think, what was the famous singer? He sang Hallelujah. What was his name? He's a poet, singer.
Can you give
Cohen.
me more of that? Like what era?
Not too long ago. He just died not too long ago. He was kind of esoteric. He's a Buddhist. I'm drawing a
Leonard
blank.
Cohen.
This is my old man moment. His last name's Cohen.
Leonard Cohen.
Leonard Cohen. Thank you, Rodney.
Well, Rodney, why don't you just come on? We'll just keep talking to. Come on, Cameron, real quick for this segment too. So, yeah, so I think, and as we were talking about this, and I think I know that this is what going. Well, wait a minute, is mystic and esoteric the same thing? No, esotericism or being an esoteric person is one is I think a little bit more essence feeling kind of spirit, where esoterics is maybe more a little bit more mental or cerebral discovery. I don't know. For me,
Say
maybe it's
mysticism
different sense.
delves with contemplation, uh, where you kind of internalize the ideas, and esotericism is just I'd say someone that's wanting to dig deeper.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, not going against either of those definitions, but mine might be a little closer to Rodney's, thinking that you can be one. Let's say you can contemplate without being an esoteric. You can be a mystic without being an esotericist, but I'm not sure if you can be an esotericist without being a mystic. Is that I might have
Well,
those flipped around, but you know what I mean?
I would even say it would be like let's take can you it's kind of like to me esoterics would be the mining operation for diamonds, and then the jeweler and the artist and the craftsman would be the mystic side of that.
That could
Is that
be.
good enough analogy or metaphor?
No, I think these are all good. This is the great thing about these kind of dialogues and Masonic education is that we bring in this kind of shared ideas. I think shared ideas are huge for education because I think what happens is if I don't agree with that interpretation you just gave me and want to build off it, then I'm perfectly in my rights to try to give a better one to you guys. If I can't give a better one to you guys, then I like yours and we adopt yours. You know how that, or we make adjustments on it.
Yeah. Or we both come up with things that are awesome, and we have like pineapple and ham
Yeah.
and jalapenos, sliced jalapenos on your pizza down here in Texas.
You know, I tell you what, I don't necessarily think what we're
That's what
trying.
we're having on Friday night. We're gonna have pizza.
I don't think what we're trying to do is trying to come up, like I said early on, we're not really trying to come up with a truth that we can all agree on. I think what we're trying to come up with is some clarity for each of us that sees things differently. So like if I had a different metaphor, I like the diamond metaphor. I just have to have some time to kind of like think about it and see if I want to make a
Contemplate
change or
it
if
so
I
you can
want to
interpret
adopt
it.
it. And I think that's kind of what it's about is whichever one helps us see our existence and the universe a little bit more clearly is how we're going to do it.
I think it's funny that you would say mystic in a kind of a rigid conservative Blue Lodge thing, and you'd be like, huh, can you now remind me again? I would do it kind of in my way of digging out information from people. Remind me again. Now, who are those two patron saints of Freemasonry? Either one of those guys, maybe mystics or esotericists or anything like that? Did any of those guys like hunting? John
Yeah,
the
really.
Baptist, right?
Just the symbolism of both of the holy saints, John's, through an esoteric lens is meaning the winter and summer solstices or the equinoxes.
I mean, you can
Again,
pull, I tell you what, a real traditional Christian brother might not like that interpretation, but a lot of brothers are going to, I like it. I
I'm
think
a
there's,
pretty traditional Southern Baptist, like Bible study leader, and I kind of led y'all towards
right.
bringing that up. I mean, I don't think those things can be have to be mutually exclusive. So
No,
that's my
I
opinion.
agree. I agree. And that's one
So
thing we don't want to discount traditions either. There's a lot of wonderful things within traditions. We just have to explore them.
yeah. So favorite, what is Dirk Hughes's favorite? And I need you to pick one, or maybe down to two, or three, or two. Favorite subject matters of study, like what? Let's. Okay, I'll say it this way. What were you inspired by whenever you were forced to go through school? What did you like? Oh, if I could just do this, and I didn't. Kind of like before you got into college, you could pick a major. Like you had to do all the basics and stuff in like elementary school, junior high, middle school, and then into high school. What did you kind of gravitate towards and love?
Well, subjects were philosophy and history. You're not gonna, I can't go wrong with those two. I think those can go hand in hand, and they each one helps you kind of interpret the other. It's a hard thing to bubble down in just to one or two. Seriously, I try to be interested in everything, and I know that's a cop out,
So
but
besides beekeeping, what would you say is the last 15, 20 years of what's caught your imagination or your attention, your focus, study wise, kind of a subject matter?
for study, well, I got into like theosophical writings a lot. The writings of Peruker and Blavatsky, the whole Theosophical Society intrigued me for a long time. I also get into, I'm
And
trying to
and
think,
what were they talking about? Because some people may not understand what theosophical is versus theology or
well,
philosophy and how that kind of comes together.
I'm talking specifically about the Theosophical Society. So the word theosophy is like wisdom religion.
Mhm.
And what really tapped into me, the motto of the Theosophical Society is there is no God greater than truth. And I found that so beautiful and pure. And I wouldn't say I'm a practicing theosophist, but I found the different avenues that a study of theosophy took me into Eastern religions, Hinduism, Buddhism. It took me into like more mystical traditions of the Western religions, Sufism, Kabbalah. I always mispronounce it. I slaughter it. Martinism. I mean, there's mystical traditions in every tradition. And I think those are really interesting things to pursue. So I've gone in that direction.
Real
And I
quick, since
usually have some kind of philosophical or some kind of so I've got like a stack of 20 books next to my bed. It's all the what mood I'm in that night. I'll grab it and start reading it.
since you're so close to Indiana, has that ever taken you down to Camp Chesterfield?
Camp Chesterfield, which Fetzer was a big fan of Camp Chesterfield, by the way.
I think he either helped fund it or something, but he was fascinating, like completely fascinated with Camp Chesterfield.
Well, I know I've met a few brothers through the research lodges that are regular attendees. I want to go check out their library, definitely, and I need to get there. So, yeah, one of these days, maybe. Have you been there?
Oh yeah, many times. Uh, interesting enough, my old keyboard player for my band, when he was growing up, he spent many days there in the summer because his grandma was a psychic there, and she's actually buried there in the courtyard.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I'm fascinated with anybody that leaves open opportunities to learn. When people shut down, they lose me, and I think I lose them because the whole idea to me, certainty is when you've made a decision to close your mind. Although, and I don't want this to get confused with faith, but there's an idea of certainty that really doesn't allow you to stay open to new ideas coming in. If you're open to new ideas coming in, then you're not really truly certain. You're highly confident in the truth of something, but you're not certain. To me, certainty is a lock-in. And I'm always like the Camp Chesterfields, the Theosophists, and just to mention the Theosophical Society is really it's about this whole idea that I mean, I don't want to get into the technicalities of like monads and different traditions, these Mahatmas and all this kind of stuff, because I'm not sure if I buy into it, but I enjoy reading about it, and it keeps my learning. The best word I can think of is organic. It keeps it growing. It keeps it moving.
I think what you're talking about is and this word has been demonized also kind of in modern sense, skepticism. I think you're talking about a healthy skepticism.
I have a healthy skepticism in just everything, but I also have a healthy acceptance of just about everything.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is what I've developed, and I think we can, if y'all want to start helping say this kind of term, artistic curiosity. Because
Oh, I like that.
you have to have an artistic level of curiosity. Like just because you're wanting to figure it out, just because you need to figure it out.
Yeah.
There's a drive inside of you just to figure it out.
Or to understand it more. I mean, I might not ever figure it out, but I would love to understand it more.
Right. Well, excuse me. Yes, you're curious about it, and those are the people that tend to be interesting, inspiring, and you walk away from it, and you're just like you feel drained and filled at the same time.
Yep.
Hopefully, hopefully we create that whether you're one of us on the podcast recording or you're getting to experience it as an audience member. All right, so let's have some fun. This is our kind of last segment, and we're not going to break or anything, so we're just going to go straight into it. These are no wrong or right answers. It's kind of the either or. Don't try to figure out what I like or whatever. This is just kind of what hits you. I'm gonna kind of present two things that I think are similar, and you just say one over the other. So the first one is Stones or Beatles.
Stones. And that's
And
the right answer.
those of us that understand that because I say, you know, them and AC, they're probably the ones that help people understand what a real rock and roll band could be.
Don't get me wrong, I love the Beatles.
I enjoy the Beatles and love them on a certain level, yes, and admire them, yes. But if you say what's like the original, probably greatest rock band in the world, they're a rock band.
Mm-hmm.
They never strayed from that. They've done some different things. What about Star Wars or Star Trek?
I guess this all depends. Doggone it. I have to pick one, right?
You can say you like one more than the other. You can like both of them.
I'm gonna go with Star Trek.
And
Do I have to give a reason?
yeah, on this one, I'm not going to ask you on every one of them, but why? Yeah.
All right. I think Star Trek has a more impactful aspect on, I mean, Star Wars was very iconic and almost archetypal. Is that the right word? Archetypal? Am I using that
Joseph,
right word?
Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell.
Yeah. So it's very Joseph Campbell. And I think, personally, I think Star Trek had a more social impact. It did a lot of things in the 60s that no other show did. And I might be tying into Star Trek because of those aspects. Which one do I enjoy watching more? I was just watching Andor before this podcast, so that's a Star Wars thing.
Yeah. Yeah, Star Trek hadn't put out a lot of newer content. It's been a couple of years since they had a movie, but
Right.
yeah, they're both great. Yeah. So Stevie Ray Vaughan or Eddie Van Halen?
Stevie Ray Vaughan. I tell you what, I listen to Eddie Van Halen more probably because I'm from Michigan, but I don't think there was a better all-around guitarist than Stevie Ray Vaughan. I don't know. I can't think of too many.
Jimi
All around.
Hendrix, Ginger Baker. They're and my I mean I love Stevie Ray, but I never got to see him perform, and he was a very small figure on stage. But in Lubbock, Texas, one night back in like 1995, I got to see ZZ Top in person.
Very cool. Well,
And
tell you,
Billy Gibbons to me just he blows me away. Of course, him and Stevie Ray, they're playing like what it would probably take other mere mortals, three different mere mortals to do the same licks, and then they're playing the rhythm guitar part, and just all this other almost like a bass. It's like it's crazy. It's like if you sit there and listen to it.
well,
So
I tell you, my youth was much more impacted by Eddie Van Halen. I was much more into Van Halen, but I lived near in Freeport and worked in Houston for about a year. And I
gotcha.
think that's where I kind of got introduced to Stevie Ray Vaughan and probably gained an appreciation for him.
It's always flooding down in Texas.
Yep.
So all right. So Doc Martens or Red Wings?
Doc Martens, hands down.
That's what I figured. Hank Senior or Hank Junior?
Now I feel bad about this because I'm not, you guys are Texans. I'm not a big country music fan. So I think Hank Sr.
So here's what I would
That's more
say.
folky.
Here's what I would say. You don't have a lot of you don't have the Rolling Stones without Hank Senior.
Yeah, I think that's probably why I'm more toward like I'll tell you what, I do like old Conway Twitty. I like old school country stuff.
Yeah,
Um, so I guess that would be Hank Sr.
yeah. So I'm the only one from Texas. He's a fellow Midwesterner like you.
All right, I'm not insulting Rodney.
Yeah, no. So Elvis or Johnny Cash?
Elvis.
Got it. Harley or Kawasaki?
BMW, baby.
I didn't know. I knew you're probably more of a motorcycle guy, but
I think I'd go Harley. I'm kind of scared of motorcycles, to tell you truthfully. I think I'm going to break my ankles, but I think I'd rather ride a Harley
yeah,
than the speed rockets.
that's a good way to put that. Clean it up a little bit. Checkers or chess?
Jess,
Darts or pool?
darts.
My man. We'll have to play some darts when you come down to San Antonio. Led Zeppelin or The Who?
Two of my favorite bands, man. I gotta say, simply based on who I listen to more often, Led Zeppelin,
Queen or Pink Floyd?
Queen.
I think your pause reminds me of how much a mystic you are. What do you think about that, Rodney? Was that like a mystical pause right there? Freddie Mercury, The Wall,
The retired.
The Dark Side of the Moon. He was sitting there like, oh my gosh.
I know. I tell you what, I was thinking about that stuff, and I was thinking there's very few sides of an album than side two that I like better of Night at the Opera. Night at the Opera side two, for some reason, it's just one of my favorite things to listen to.
Uh, by the way, Brian May, lead guitarist,
Great.
Freemason, England, right? And then John Entwistle, right, was the bassist for The Who. Speaking
I
of,
heard Phil Collins was a Freemason too. Is that true?
yeah, that's supposedly true. Yeah, we
Let's just say he is.
yeah. So AC/DC or Black Sabbath?
AC/DC, but with a couple of Black Sabbath tunes that I can't get out of my brain.
Def Leppard or Motley Crue?
I'll go Def Leppard. I was more into them when I was younger. Got introduced to Motley Crue a little bit later.
Middle Earth or Narnia?
Middle Earth. Narnia is not even a real place.
Well, technically, technically. So yeah, I actually it's kind of the Star Wars, Star Trek thing for me. Queen, Pink Floyd. I love them both. I don't know if there's a Plato or Aristotle.
Hmm. I guess I gotta go Plato. I'm probably just more familiar with Plato's stuff than with more of Plato's stuff.
Sean
I read more
Connery,
Plato in college than I did Aristotle.
Sean Connery or Daniel Craig?
I think Daniel Craig's doing a bang up job.
I always said that he was the perfect combination of Sean Connery's manhood with Roger Moore's humor. he can make the jokes work as Bond. So
Yeah.
I think just all the you see Roger Moore and other stuff, except for the Saint, kind of doing almost the same role, and Sean Connery had some good anyway. But yeah, I think he's even more diverse as he's not being Bond anymore and doing some other stuff. But
But Sean Connery's got some. I'm not sure about Bond, but I mean, you can't beat him in the Untouchables. Sean Connery was like
yeah,
he was the boss in the Untouchables.
Amtrak or airlines.
I I'm not sure if I've taken a train more than once, so I'm gonna. Oh, you talking about whether I like them or not?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I was curious. Like,
I hate going to airports. I like flying, and I hate going through TSA. So I think I'm gonna pick. I don't think Amtrak probably has as bad of a TSA kind of thing, so I'm gonna pick Amtrak.
bowler or fedora.
Uh, I'm kind of a hat collector, and I wear both. But I think I wear fedoras more often because they're more versatile. So I'm gonna pick. There's a time and place for a bowler, but I'm gonna pick a fedora.
Belt or suspenders.
Mm, belts.
Buttons or cufflinks.
I prefer cufflinks, but I use buttons more often. I'm too lazy to put cufflinks on every single time.
Mountain or beach. Mountains or beach.
Mountain. Not even a thought. Mountain.
So, tobacco, pipe or cigar. And you notice I said tobacco first. Pipe or cigar.
I've grown an appreciation of cigars. A lot of my brothers enjoy cigars, and I've imbibed with them. I enjoy a good cigar. Pipes remind me of my father, and they have more variety in the smell of the tobacco. So I think I've got a nostalgic pull towards pipe, but I think I'm going to go with cigar because I think they're much more versatile, more opportunity to smoke them, and they're easier to do other things with your other hand.
What say you, Rodney? I know what his. I know where he's.
Right now, it's more so pipe,
I don't blame you. I'm not going to hold that
but
against you.
it depends on the situation. I mean, it's more convenient to just light up a cigar. It's more of a ritual to smoke a pipe.
Yep.
We,
I
we,
think pipe's more contemplative. If I
Oh,
was
definitely.
contemplating around a campfire, I'd smoke a pipe.
Mhm.
so much of Pen and Compass's, if there's any success to date, is Rodney being out in his former house, the house he just moved from, smoking a pipe and talking to me either some way electronically, for us to be like planning and brainstorming and all this kind of stuff, and like what do we want shaping and creating. So city
Does
or
it get
country? Oh, so go
better?
ahead. What, Rodney?
Does it get much better than relaxing with the pipe and discussing these ideas?
Yeah.
I bet.
So city or country, Dirk? Or suburb versus city, whatever. I mean, it can be
I'm
kind of.
not a big suburb fan. If I'm going to go country, it's going to go way out in the country. But I think I'm more comfortable in country. I love cities, but only for short periods of time.
Yeah.
I can hang
Gumbo.
out in the country.
I'm the same way. That's why I recently moved because I got tired of the city of Fort Wayne. But
So gumbo or how do you say that word? Poutine, poutine, poutine,
Poutine,
poutine. Yeah, gumbo. Or
um, I gotta go gumbo.
you've thrown that. That's living in on the Gulf Coast. You learned how to eat Cajun food. Good for you. Congratulations.
I lived in Freeport for a year.
Yeah, I've been to Freeport. There's a lot of good places. Oyster Creek is right there. I mean, you can't get much better than Oyster Creek.
I mean, I lived right on the right on the beach on one of those like stilt houses.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
No, that's a don't tell everybody about it. We don't want them to go down there and spoil it with all their tourist dollars.
Well, I think a hurricane wiped it out, so I don't even think they're there anymore.
Yeah. Galveston's nicer than we want to let people know about it because we don't want prices to go up down there. So kind of last thing, what's your vision of what you're going to be doing going forward besides this Esoteric Summit that we've talked about? What do you got going on? You got Midwest and
Got the Midwest coming up. I'm excited about this kind of project in the Grand Lodge of Michigan about developing this educational, I guess we'd call it an initiative. And that's going to be a lot of interesting things branching off from that. So we got Grand Lodge coming up, and this is the first year that the research lodges are actually going to be having a table. So we're going to be really trying to talk up Masonic education at Grand Lodge this year. Our Grand Lodge is happening in just what, 19th? Couple weeks. So I'm kind of incorporating, see what I can incorporate with that. And I'm excited about how our social media is doing. I mean, I just had somebody call me the other day from Washington. I'm also the vice president of the Masonic Library and Museum Association, the MLMA. And I got a call from one of our members out in Washington, and she was like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that some people out here were saying that we should do like social media videos like you guys are doing," which means the social media videos are getting out there and people are seeing them. So I have my assistant Shannon to thank for that. She's the one that really puts them together and edits them. And those are exciting creative opportunities. I mean, to try to explore how we can incorporate new interesting things. I don't know a lot about AI. And of course, there's like the science fiction scary thing about it, but there's also some really great opportunities I'm looking into to explore with that as far as how that can work with education.
Yeah, well, we in our production work, some of our graphics for this podcast, maybe going forward, in the last couple of weeks, we have someone else that's a part of the production company, and we're developing a music podcast. It's a little bit different than Pen and Compass, Masonic Vibe, and we're going to be using AI tools to hopefully make our production a lot better without having to have thousands of dollars of equipment and just kind of software. And that's what probably AI is going to do a lot. You're going to be able to up your game, just like now we can take pictures all the time, right?
But
Without having to have a 35 millimeter camera and do some really cool things with video and pictures that we couldn't do before our smartphones became this smart. So cool. Rodney, you got any final questions or input for our talking to Dirk?
Did you want to put a quick promo in for the Midwest or the education conference that you're part of or that you're attending?
well, is it when's this going to be? It's happening this next week, so I don't know if this is going to be out before.
Yeah, no, that'll probably it's going to be yeah, we're sitting in April, almost first week of May, last week of April, so yeah. So
That annual thing though, correct?
Yep, it is annual. So I think that's a good idea. Thanks, Rodney. If you ever get a chance to go to the Masonic Conference on I'm sorry, the Midwest Conference on Masonic Education. It's hosted usually in different places every year, but it's usually, of course, in the Midwest. That's why they call it the Midwest.
and those
Highly rec-
states would be which because everybody has a just like mystics and cult and esoteric people
So
have different definitions of that. So what's the
the last one
Midwest?
we had was in Minneapolis.
Got it.
This
So
year's
Michigan.
is in
So,
Indianapolis.
yep.
So Michigan, Ohio, probably
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how it pulls from all these different.
Nebraska, I know is a part of it because I've those our buddies TJ and Parker,
Matthew,
Matthew Parker have discussed that event with me in coming and just kind of the scope of what's going on with that. What
and
about
what's nice about that event is it's talking about education and how to education and what's the best way. It's not you're not like going there and finding out like the history of a specific subject. You're talking about how best to educate your Masonic lodges and Freemasons and how and so that's really
a
a neat
how-to workshop more
kind of like a how-to workshop.
than kind of a festive board banquet bow tie glass of red wine toast type
Right.
talk, right?
Definitely sounds like a great event for worshipful masters across the state should attend, or any leaders.
Yeah, so who would be eligible for that? Is it Master Masons only, or
Hmm. I'm not absolutely sure, but I presume it is. Although I don't think they talk about anything that's sensitive. I guess it all depends on the speakers. Like we're having non-Masonic speakers, so I'm assuming um,
non-Masons could come?
I'm assuming non-Masons could come.
Yeah,
But that would be something that somebody smarter than me would be able to tell you.
I think it's Master
right.
Mason.
You think it's Master Masons?
Yeah, because even though I think one of the speakers you're mentioning, I think Heather Calloway will be there.
Yep.
She's spoken at our Lodge of St. Andrew here in Auburn, and it was still Master Mason only, even though it was a non-Mason speaker. I'm just assuming it'll be
Yeah.
similar to that.
Yeah. It
You
could
can
be.
have open type segments, and yeah. So, well, very cool. Well, very exciting episode. I think this episode, Rodney, as we've gone through it without even reviewing it, we ask a lot of the same questions, but you and I had a different, and with Rodney's input, we all three had like this different take on questions that we already had answered 10 times.
Yeah,
And I think that's the cool thing, that each kind of collection of people, even though Rodney and I are kind of the constants in this, the questions kind of are the same. Adding Dirk or TJ or RJ or whatever adds a different element to it. I think that's healthy for us to remember that there's parts, but the sum is bigger than the parts.
exactly. We get a new perspective with each new guest, and it helps expand all of our consciousnesses.
I like it. And I apologize for probably all the edit. If you're trying to hit an hour and a half on this thing, you're going to be doing some serious
No,
editing.
that's why we do we now segment the recording and
Right.
break it up into parts of the same episode. But we record this, by the way, folks. We kind of record this in one thing and break it up, because obviously we're all wearing got the same backgrounds, we're in the same articles of clothing and things like that. So, well, this is exciting. It's wonderful. Just makes me. I think you're not because just by scheduling. I think you're the last one that's involved with the San Antonio Esoteric Summit, and all the speakers and leaders for that, and MCs. And so, if you are going back in the Pen and Compass playlist, there are each of the speakers except for Matthew Roger Christmas. Everybody that's having an episode, Patrick Carr and Matthew Roger Christmas, are the only two that will not be at this year's San Antonio Esoteric Summit for 2025. But everybody else is a speaker or a leader or the MC and be a contributing part of that. So it's very exciting to kind of wrap up that kind of season, I guess you could say, Rodney, right? That's kind of been our first season. This is a high point, definitely, and a high note to end it on. So Dirk, you did an awesome job, and man, even though it was two-dimensional and a lot shorter than I wanted to be, thanks for being my buddy, and just
Thanks for being my buddy.
man, just that first handshake. I can sit there and visualize it. You standing there next to the counter in the library, and it just means the world to me. And I can't wait till you get a chance to spend time with the guys that you haven't previously met, and our 50 participants and all the guys in San Antonio that are going to be coming to this. So
I'm totally looking forward to June. It's going to be awesome.
yeah, June 7th, 2025, San Antonio Esoteric Summit. You can find information about it on Facebook groups and stuff like that. So, well, with that, we're going to wrap up this episode with Dirk Hughes, the director of the Michigan Masonic Library Museum. I said it.
Museum and library.
Museum and library. Okay, I did it the other way around. I thought it was library. Oh, that's a Texas thing. We
MML.
probably call it library and museum in Texas. So, all right, let me try it again. Michigan Masonic Museum and Library, MMML. I'll try to remember that for the future. Awesome. Thank you guys for being part of this tonight, and thank everybody for watching Pen and Compass. Whether you're a Freemason, whether you're a friend or family of one of us, or whether you just found us on YouTube, we are excited that you're here, and thank you so much for letting us share our conversation with you. Remember to hit the like button, to subscribe. That helps the YouTube algorithm, so that we're something that everybody should be participating in and check out at least. And for that, we'll just say good night, and thanks everybody. That's it.
Keep seeking more light.
Thanks, brothers.